Hello and welcome to this, our 251st live stream. Live streams and rumors of live streams. If you don't know what that refers to, please check out Monday's video where we talked about wars and rumors of wars and the end times. I don't think the end times is happening quite just yet. Dr. Falk hit down the volume switch. Okay, we can turn it down a bit. Let's go down to that. All right, hopefully that's better. We didn't peek out, so you might have to turn your own volume down a bit. All right. Channel business. We don't... actually, that still looks pretty good, so... channel business is we're just going to pitch our premiere book, Reliquary of the Dead. If you haven't bought this award-winning novel, it's won 8 literary awards. We ask that you please do so and leave a review on Amazon. We thank you so much for those of you who've left the reviews. We really appreciate it, and it helps us out a bunch. So we so appreciate it. Okay. So that's the channel business. Not much in the way of channel business, other than we are going to be ending at 12 p.m. sharp. So speaking of the end, tonight's live stream will end at 12 a.m. sharp. Yeah, we're not going to go 12 hours, sorry. So we are, I have to get up really early tomorrow, so there's just no way I'm going to be able to do a 1 a.m. live stream at this point. So we're going to end it at midnight. Absolutely. Even if there's super chats. Okay, even if there's super chats, we're going to end at midnight regardless. So let's get into the questions here. I forgot to pull up Mr. AT's questions here, so that'll just take a moment here. Open. What is that? All right, there we go. There. All right. Okay, I think we are ready to roll. Cool. Okay, so let's get into the rules and get right into the questions. Super chats have priority, same as always on any YouTube channel. So that should go almost without saying. Non-super chat questions have to begin with a Q and a colon. If they don't begin with a Q and a colon, they might as well not exist. And what is going on here with my camera? Something funky's happening to my camera here. Zooming out a bit here. Good, that looks better. All right. Yeah, camera control isn't always the best on this channel. Ooh, zoom. Yeah, well. Good times. Good times. The disco mode. Okay. If you post a non-super chat, only post it once. If you post it multiple times, we will disqualify it for the night. This is a hard and fast rule. Doesn't matter if it's the first time on the channel. We are absolutely going to stick to that rule. Okay. Also, we should make it clear that just because you put in a question with a Q and a colon doesn't mean it will be answered. Questions are not guaranteed to be answered. So we just want to make that clear too. If it's something from the Bible, we need a little bit of context. So please add the what book it's from, what chapter and what verse. This just helps speed the question along. Also, you can sponsor non-super chats, but we ask that you copy the non-super chat into your super chat so that we don't have to hunt for it. Just makes things a whole lot easier for us. And then finally, one question per chat. No questions stacking. If you question stack, we'll just take one question out of whatever you stacked and just answer the one. All right? So I hope that clears up the rules. Let's get into questions. All right, our first question of the night here comes from King Bubby. who asks, do you believe Satan fell before the creation of the universe or when he tempted Adam and Eve? Okay. I believe Satan fell at the same time as Adam and Eve. Okay? So that's where I sort of go with Satan. Now, I also don't think that Satan was the first to fall. I think there was others that fell before him. Okay? But he's sort of the big name here of who fell. He's the highest ranking angel to fall because he was a throne cherubim. So he's the big mucky muck who is sort of the the highest ranking bum. All right. So that's what I maintain. I don't think he fell before the creation, because basically none of these spirit critters existed before the creation, but he fell during his interaction with Adam and Eve. Okay, so hope that helps. Thank you for the question. Very much appreciated. Next question here from Darkblade. Does Matthew 7:18 deny that people can be complex or produce mixed results? Okay, let's pull up the Bible and let's take a look here. Okay. We're going to go to Matthew here. Now, he's asked this question about the last 7 weeks. So, you keep asking, eventually you might get something answered. It's been known to happen. Okay, now, in order to answer this question, the problem here is if you just take the one verse, verse 18, a good tree cannot produce bad fruit, nor can a bad fruit produce good fruit. If you just take that verse outside of its context, you can sort of derive all sorts of different meanings from it. That's why we have to go back to verse 15. Verse 15 sets the context for the verse. Okay? He says in verse 15, beware of the false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits. So whose fruits is this? This is the fruits of the false prophets. Grapes are not gathered from thorn bushes, nor figs from thistles, are they? Even so, every good tree bears good fruit, but the bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot produce bad fruit, nor can a bad tree produce good fruit. Okay? So the context of this is the teaching of the false prophets. That's the context. This is not to be applied to people in general. Okay? So it's not denying that people can be complex or produce mixed results. It's not denying that. What it's saying is that the results, the fruit that is born from false prophets and false teachers and false Christs will result in bad things. Because that's the issue here. He's not making this. He's talking about people that are coming into the church, okay, to try to sway the believer to follow false teachings, false prophecies, and ultimately false messiahs, and false salvation. So that's what it's talking about here, that those false prophets cannot produce ultimately fruit that saves, salvific fruit. It's always going to produce theologically bad fruit. Okay? So, yeah, free grace alert, among others. Okay? That's just one. That is just one here. So yeah, you got to read this in this context. Context. Context is everything. Okay? So it's not denying that that bad people can't do good things. It's not denying that. What it's denying is that the results of false teaching are going to be good. That's what it's denying. So I hope that helped. I know you asked this for like 7 weeks in a row, and I hope that answers your question. So thank you very much for the question. I'm going to take one more non-super chat, and then we're going to get right to the super chats, because as I said, we gotta be kind of brief tonight. Okay, we'll take Pablo Marquez here, and he says, how was the state of the Ark of the Covenant at the time of King Josiah? How was it to look at an Egyptian box inside the temple lots of centuries later? Okay, for the most part, it would have probably been okay. The fact is that ritual furniture of this type, as long as it wasn't exposed to a lot of damp conditions, wouldn't have warped really, at least not to any great extent. It probably wouldn't have delaminated. As long as it was sheltered and dried, yeah, probably would have been fine. So, we have examples of wood furniture that have lasted for centuries already inside controlled conditions of, say, a church that have survived very, very well. So it wouldn't have looked much different. It might have had some what's called metal blooming, where, say, maybe some sap leaked out of the acacia wood and caused a staining on the gold. That happens. We see that on some of the ritual furniture of King Tut, where you get some gold blooming happening. But that's about all that really would. It wouldn't have deteriorated to any great extent because of the controlled conditions inside of a temple. It's sheltered, it's dry, humidity is relatively constant. So, yeah, it would have. Would it be valuable? What would be valuable? The Ark of the Covenant? It's got a lot of gold, I think so. Would it be valuable? Yes, it'd be very valuable. At least the gold content, you're talking about a talent of gold. That's a lot of gold. Would be very, very expensive. Ryan Cohenkamp asked, wouldn't it be caked in blood because of all the splashing from the Days of Atonement? No, not really. One of the things is that we're talking about a sprinkle, okay? Like, the sprinkle is diluted with water, okay? The blood's diluted with water, and then you take a hyssop branch and you just give it a little splish. That's it. So there's the blood. It's not like you would have seen blood caked on it. It would have been too diluted. It probably would have eventually sort of fell off. It just... So it actually wouldn't have even been much in the way of, say any of that sort of stuff. Again, it might cause a little bit of staining on the gold surface, maybe, but it wouldn't have been caked in blood, because that's not how it worked. So, as I said, typically the blood was mixed with a little bit of water to dilute it, and then it was sprinkled. So hope that helps. Thank you for the question. Okay, let's get to the super chats now. First super chat is from the Penniless Theologian for €5. A little bunny acting up. I don't know either, hon. Bunny just threw her bowl over the side, so... okay. Bunny acting up. Bunny stunts, exactly. Bunny stunts. Okay. She wants to be the star. She wants to be the star of the show. All right. Penniless Theologian asks, read your book last year on the Ark. Knife edge economy is a fascinating concept. Yeah, knife edge agriculture is really, really interesting. Maybe rethink fasting. Was this a reality throughout biblical history? Yes, it was. In fact, knife edge agriculture was the reality through most of humanity. So, really, right up until the 20th century, knife edge agriculture was the norm. It was not, bountitude of produce was not the norm, it was the exception. Okay? So, knife edge agriculture is the norm through almost all of human history, right up to the last 150 years. Essentially, 150 years. So, CPM versus DOS, it still is in some places. Yeah, but not very many anymore. We actually have, with improved agricultural methods, very few places now suffer from the problems of knife edge agriculture. Obesity is more the problem these days. So, yeah, Scott Worthen goes, everything before the ammonia breakthrough, I believe. Yeah. Yeah, the synthesis of synthetic ammonia really changed the game. Oh, that was one of the things. The other thing that changed was seed lines. Genetically, not genetically, but specifically bred seed lines changed a lot. For example, the modern seed line of wheat is a hybrid. It's a hybrid of two kinds of wheat. One that grew very short, but wasn't very plentiful, and one that grew very tall and sort of bent over, but was plentiful. Okay. The difficulty here was the short one, you couldn't harvest. I mean, there wasn't much there to harvest. But the tall variety was so difficult to harvest because it bent down and ended up touching the ground. They bred the two seed lines together and produced this medium height wheat that still was bountiful, but it remained upright, which allowed machine harvesting. So Darkblade, was it the norm in the early 1930s Soviet Union? Yeah, it was. But let's face it, the Soviet Union was still practicing medieval architecture in the medieval agriculture in the 1930s. So, Charlemagne wanted his agriculture back. So, but really, it's a combination of synthetic ammonia, seed lines, actually also improved hydrology too. Improved hydrology was a big deal. So, did you retrieve it back for her? Oh, you gave her something else. Okay, that's easy to explain. Okay. Okay, so anyway, I hope that helps. Yes, indeed, knife edge agriculture was the norm throughout the entire history of mankind, right up till the 20th century. Yeah, we're getting bunny updates here. She's behaving a little like a little diva. Next one here is from Levi. Thank you very much for the super chat for €11. Really appreciate it. He says, "Hi, Dr. Falk. What's your take on Judges 1:8? The claim seems odd to me in light of claims made elsewhere in verse 21, Joshua 15:63, as well as an apparent lack of a destruction layer during this period." Okay, now what he's talking about here is the initial conquest of Jerusalem. And we'll just go here to Joshua 1 verse 8. Okay. Judges 1 verse 8. Okay. And it says, "Then the sons of Judah fought against Jerusalem and captured it and struck it with the edge of the sword and set the city on fire." Okay. Now, here's where we have to be careful of overreading the text. The text doesn't say the city was destroyed with fire. It just says they set the city on fire. They also captured it, struck it with the edge of the sword. They also didn't wipe everyone out either. Okay, so they broke down the wall, went inside, killed a bunch of people, set the city on fire, and then left. It was enough time for people inside the city to rebuild the walls and refortify it. Now, when a city like this is set on fire, unless they torch the whole thing, you might not see a destruction there. And the fact is that we haven't excavated enough of Jerusalem to actually know where there's a destruction there and where there isn't. Okay, so it's just one of those things that only you can prevent city fires. Okay, Smokey the Bear. Nice. Yeah, so we do know that this sort of temporary invasion of Jerusalem wasn't permanent, because right through the kingdom period it remained in the hands of the Jebusites until David conquers it. So it's a Jebusite city from its beginning. At least when the Amorites start taking over, becomes a Jebusite city. A Jebusite city is just a local name for Amorites. Okay, so it's an Amorite city more or less. And the city went by many names. It went by Salem, Jebus, Urushalem, but it's essentially it remains a Jebusite city right up until the conquest by King David. And even when David conquers it, he still doesn't wipe out everyone there, as far as we can tell. But at that point, the Israelites are in control of it. So they don't get control of Jerusalem until David conquers it. But they do sack it in Judges 1:8. So Darkblade, Judah came, offed people, committed some arson, and then left for 200 years. Yeah. They offed some people and committed some arson. It's probably the best way to say it. So they offed some people, committed some arson, and then sort of couldn't touch it again for another 200 years. So that's really what kind of happened there. So, hope that helps. Thank you for the super chat. Very much appreciate it. Ryan Cohenkamp. So why didn't they just stay? Because they were this was part of this whole section of Judges is basically where the tribes start securing their own inheritance. So what seems to have happened with Judah is they went around sacking cities. Okay, many they kept intact because they're going to move in. Some they just sacked to weaken them, and they're going around through the region sacking and conquering to secure their inheritance, essentially the tribal inheritance of Judah. So it looks like they started with Jerusalem, but they couldn't just occupy it. They had to go and secure the rest of their territory. And while they're off securing the rest of their territory, the Jebusites rebuild. So okay. Next super chat here is from Messianic Talmud for $5. Thank you very much for the super chat. Did the Egyptians at any point in their kingdom charge the Semitic Asiatics a fee to graze or water their livestock in the Delta region? To our knowledge, no. The Egyptians never did that. The Egyptians may have taxed some of their cattle at some point if they had stayed there, but we don't actually have any evidence of them charging a fee for the use of the water or the land. So, yeah, so we just don't have any evidence for that. So, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Follower of Ichthys for $5. He goes, "Hey, Dr. Falk, I hope all is well." Yes, it is. Thank you very much. Is it true people used to make a paint called Mummy Brown made of ground up ancient mummies? Yes, it is true. This was a thing that was common in pigments sold in England and France. Now, Mummy Brown was actually not all that brown. It was kind of like a greenish gray color. Really an ugly color, to be honest. I don't know why this was popular among artists, but yeah, they did this. They would ground up. They did some weird stuff with mummies in the 19th century. They would grind them up for pigments like this. They would also grind it. Yeah, I was going to say that. Grind them up and use it for snuff. That was gross. Okay. I don't know why. What was the big deal? Why they even did that? But they used it for snuff too. So the Europeans had some really weird things with mummies. So Andrew Graham, did they paint pictures of the mummies? Sometimes they did. Yeah, they did that. One of the things that people would do with, say, Mummy Brown is they would try to imitate. They figured that they figured that this would emulate the color of the desert. So a lot of, say, the desert backgrounds in mummy portraits, and they did do mummy portraits. This was a thing. They would use the Mummy Brown for trying to emulate that color of desert, that kind of green. Desert's not really green; it's gray. But that's why you're going to see a lot. You see a lot of, say, paintings of that era with kind of this greenish gray background. It's because they're using Mummy Brown for that. It's kind of gross, to be honest. It's just, it's. I'm not so grossed out by the use of mummies for that. Just the color is aesthetically gross. You know, it's like puce. It's a terrible color. Looks more like yeah, it looks like more like a swamp than a desert. Terrible. So, yeah, just ick. Icky ick. So, yep, it was a thing. They did this. And, yeah, not much more to say about it. I mean, it was light fast. It was a stable color. Stable color of puke gray, but, yeah, all the ugly colors are light fast and stable. Go figure. It's the pretty colors that aren't. Okay, Messianic Talmud for $5. Thank you for the super chat. How effective were the Egyptian forts in the Sinai region for detecting approaching enemies or supplying the Egyptian army? They were very effective. They actually held off the Sea Peoples during the invasions of Ramses III, I believe in his 7th and 11th year, regnal years. I don't know if those are the exact years, but they held off two invasions of the Sea People, who invaded right into the lagoon where you had the Lion's Den and Migdol and all that. So yeah, the forces themselves were very effective for detecting the approach of enemies and for defending their northern coast. Now, as far as supplying the Egyptian army, those fortresses also became part of the supply lines. So when Pharaoh went on campaign, the charioteers would go from fort to fort to fort, resupplying and camping around each fort. So it became really a vital part of their supply line right up until they hit Gaza. And then once they hit Gaza, then they had to sort of basically find supplies either locally or by occasionally they would have ships that would supply them as they went up the coastal plain. But yeah, it became really a part of their supply lines. So yeah, very important for the Egyptian army going into, say, the coastal plain. So hope that helps. Thank you for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Okay, next one here. Which is Messianic Talmud for $5. And he asks, is one of the problems with the story of Esther is that most of the history is from Greek sources because we don't have any good Persian records? Yeah, there's a problem with Persian records. The problem was that they made it on ephemeral materials, particularly parchment and papyrus. Okay, and when the Persian Empire had Egypt under their control, they would write things on papyrus. When they didn't have it under control, they would write things on parchment. Akkadians would write things on clay tablets, and those were very permanent, especially if they were fired. But the Persians didn't write on clay tablets, generally. So we have very, very few sources from the Persian period. So, because most of it went moldy and rotted away. So, it just wasn't a great thing. That we don't have a lot of, say, contemporary sources from the Persian period. Most of what we have from the Persian period has been recorded into Greek. So yeah, unfortunately, most of our sources for the Persian period come from Greek sources. There are a few monumental inscriptions, but really not very much. At least not relatively speaking. So, hope that helps. Thank you for the super chat. Very much appreciated. I'll take this one from a non-super chat from Daniel Hogan, because I think it's an important one. Daniel Hogan asks, regarding the late Exodus, there's not a lot of time for the judges before the monarchy. How do you reconcile fitting a dozen judges in the time period between conquest and monarchy? Everyone has to do this. Okay? Regardless of whether you believe in the early Exodus or the late Exodus. Everybody has to do this. The reason why is if you add up all the judges together, you get 519 years. Not 480, not 440, 519. So everyone has to overlap the period of the judges in some way. And I think apart from the first couple judges, almost all those judges are overlapped anyway. So they're not judges over the entire nation of Israel. Most of these judges are judges over, say, a particular tribe or area, like Jephthah. He's got a little section of, say, the northeastern portion of Israel. So, he's neighbors with the Ammonites. So, he's going to be basically the tribe of Ephraim, or the tribe of Manasseh as such. So there's going to be that sort of regional identification with a lot of these judges. So, but yeah, it's going to happen it doesn't matter if you're an early dater or a late dater. This is a problem for both. And the way that it's typically reconciled is that they are said to overlap. And the text leaves that open, basically saying that, oh, you got this judge, and then you got that judge. But it's not chronological, so, it's easy to reconcile as such. Okay, so I hope that helps. Thank you very much for the question. Really appreciate it. We'll be going back to 752 if we have time. Next one here. Follower of the Ichthys for $5. Do you think that the Euphrates drying up is literal in Revelation 16:12? Not necessarily. Hmm? All right. There's a cluster of good questions in there. So we'll go back to that portion if we got the time. So the Euphrates drying up, is it literal? No, not necessarily. What it's suggesting is that the Euphrates is passable at that point by a large army. Okay, from the east. So that's really what it's trying to communicate here. Not that it's literally drying up, but that passage by a large army would be fairly easy. Now, today, you could just say, "Oh, there's bridges there," and that would be essentially the same sort of thing. So, it doesn't have to be literal here. In fact, most of this is going to be contextualized to some sort of Old Testament prophecy. In the case of, say, the Euphrates drying up and the release of the angels, these are probably the release of the cherubim. So, Ryan Cohnkamp, could it be damned in the future? Could be, but it's not the best river to dam. It's the thing with the Euphrates. It's a broad, slow moving river. It's wide. It's a wide, slow moving river. It's not like the Tigris. The Tigris is a rapid, narrow river. Okay, so could be dammed, possibly. I mean, but there you'd have to dam it way high up to even make this viable, and I don't even know if that would even be viable for the Euphrates, just because it's so broad. But possible. We just don't know. Okay, so hope that helps. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very appreciated. But it could be literal, could be figurative, it could be it could reference something in the Old Testament regarding the release of the cherubim that take peace from the earth. But let's just take a look at the text anyway, just to do a due diligence here. Revelation 16, verse 12. Okay, and the sixth angel poured out his bowl upon the great river, the Euphrates, and its water was dried up, that the way may be prepared for the kings from the east. So yeah, it just means that it becomes passable by the armies of the east. And I saw coming out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet, 3 unclean spirits like frogs. For they are spirits of demons performing signs, out of which go out to the kings of the whole earth to gather them together for the great day of God the Almighty. Okay. So, again, these are spirits that go out and they're going to collect, basically goad the kings to come together to fight. So that's sort of what's being alluded to here. All right, so hope that helps. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Followers of the X is for $5. Thank you again. How do you understand Jeremiah 3:16? I heard the Temple Institute made their own ark. Not sure if it's true. Okay, let's talk about Jeremiah. Jeremiah 3:16, then we'll talk about the question. And it shall be in those days, when you are multiplied and increased in the land, declares the Lord, they shall say no more, the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and it shall not come to mind, nor shall they remember it, nor shall they miss it, nor shall it be made again. Okay, now, there's a couple of things here we should remark here about the Temple Institute in general, all right? They are a Orthodox Jewish group. Basically, they've become a sort of a money-making scam, to be honest. They claim to be preparing items for the eventual reconstruction of the Jewish temple on the Temple Mount, but they're really much more into... They really operate more like a museum, where they have these replicas that basically evangelicals visit and, pay money to see. Okay? So it's doubtful how serious they are about making these items. Now, there's no actual call for the Ark of the Covenant to be restored. So, if they have made their own Ark, it's kind of, at this point, a so what? Because you wouldn't use it again. You can't use it in a temple recreation. So, in the third temple, you couldn't use an Ark. The reason is because it plays no significance after it had been, say, destroyed or lost, depending on your view, after the destruction of the first temple. So when the second temple was rebuilt, there was no Ark. It was just an empty Holy of Holies. And Judaism, Israelite religion, progressed just fine without it. So, Israelite religion didn't skip a beat without the Ark, because the purpose of the Ark was to move the Shekinah glory from the tabernacle to the temple. That was the purpose of it, to move the presence of the Lord from his holy place on Mount Sinai all the way eventually into the temple, the Holy of the Holies. And once that was done, really the job of the Ark of the Covenant was finished. The sacred space was no longer necessary. So, it doesn't actually have a function anymore within Israelite religion. So if they made their own Ark, it's kind of a waste of money. Really. Unless their job here was, the reason they did it, was to sort of trap evangelical tourists, which is a lot of their function these days. I mean, they've been doing their thing now for over 40 years. And frankly, they are no closer to restoring the Jewish temple than they were 40 years ago. So I don't take them very seriously. So now, how do I understand Jeremiah 3:16? Is pretty much that, first of all, we have to understand the context of the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord, that statement. They shall say no more, the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord. This was one of those things that Jews of the First Temple period used to do. They would say, well, the Lord will never allow Israel to be conquered by its enemies because the Temple of the Lord is here. Temple of the Lord is here. The evil invaders can't come and conquer the temple. Okay? Or they would also say, the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord. And this was a cry to basically say, again, Israel's enemies will not come and conquer because God's presence is here with the Ark of the Covenant. That's why they took the Ark of the Covenant, took it into battle against the Philistines, and lost. because they were trusting in the Ark of the Covenant, God to protect the Ark of the Covenant, to protect the temple of the Lord, and by protecting those, protect the Israelites. Which did not work, because God removed his protection when Israel decided to become idolaters. So, you're always going to get that, like, say where the trust is in the institution, the building, the trappings, the idea, but not in the Lord himself.
And the fact, also the idea that the Lord is obligated, even if humanity.
Yeah. Backfired. Yeah, totally backfired. Keep starting making the ark like an amulet. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they did the same thing with the temple of the Lord. There in another place in Jeremiah, they said the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, but that's not going to protect you. You've sinned against God and you're not repenting. So, yeah, God's going to let the Babylonians come and take you away because of your unfaithfulness, your covenant unfaithfulness. So that first part here, the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord, people are saying that because that's what they're putting their trust in. So then, after this, in those days when you are multiplied and increased in the land, they won't say that anymore. And it shall not come to mind, nor shall they remember it, nor shall they miss it, nor shall they make it again. You can't remake the Ark of the Covenant. It was a one-time thing that really was particular to a religious and ritual context. Because that purpose has been fulfilled ritually, there's no need to rebuild it. And they won't find it again. They won't remember it, and they won't even miss it. Because they have become one with their Lord. They don't need to put their trust in amulets. Okay, so I hope that helps. Thank you, follower of the Ichthus, for that question. Really appreciate it. And I hope that you found that useful. Okay, next super chat here. From History Buff for $2. Will you respond to Holy Kool-Aid? No. That's like, no, I won't. Everything that he said, I've already rebutted many times over. Okay? There's no cause for me to respond to anything. I mean, if this guy has to dredge up things from 4 years ago, I mean, dude needs to get a life, really. Responding to a 4-year-old video, like, seriously. What a clown. All right, next one here is from Messianic Talmud for $2. Thank you very much for the super chat. Why was Gezer targeted so much by invading armies? Okay, it wasn't so much targeted, but it had a sort of a central position. It's south in the Shephelah, okay? So Gezer was kind of hard to get to, but because it was kind of hard to get to, you had to go from Egypt, you had to go all the way up the coastal plain, cross the Jezreel Valley, and all the way back down the Shephelah to get to Gezer. Okay. So what Gezer was it was an important vassal state. So if you controlled Gezer, you controlled much of the Shephelah. You controlled the entire southern Shephelah if you controlled Gezer. So it was a target for Hittites. It was a target for Egyptians who wanted to receive tribute. So if you wanted to receive tribute, you needed Gezer. You needed to control Gezer. And Gezer had basically this tendency to rebel a lot. So because it tended to rebel a lot, and because it was important, invading armies targeted it. Merneptah targeted it because it had been a vassal state for the Egyptians for a very long time. And then they rebelled after the death of Ramses II. So Merneptah's campaign into the Levant was all about a police action against Gezer. So, again, it all boils down to tribute and control of that southern Shafela region. So, hope that helps. Thank you for the super chat. Really appreciate it. Okay, next one. Thank you, Jack Ray, for the 20 Ancient Egypt and the Bible memberships. We really appreciate your support and your help. We had a bad month in February, and we really appreciate your support. It helps keep the lights on, food on our table, and it helps us to really continue to do this work. So thank you so very much. Okay, history buff again. When was Daniel written? Any further resources? I don't have a firm opinion on when Daniel was written. I tend to lean more towards an early dated Daniel than a late date one. I think at least it had to be written prior to the 4th century BC. At least. And that's because Daniel is quoted in First Enoch. And everyone agrees that First Enoch is 4th century BC. Everyone agrees on this. No one has any reason to disagree with that. And it's based upon the style of Greek you find in First Enoch. So everyone agrees that First Enoch quoted Daniel. Okay? So that means Daniel has to predate First Enoch, and First Enoch is 4th century. Now, exactly when was it written? I don't know. But because it has to predate the 4th century BC, I'm fine with it being anywhere between, say, the lifetime of Daniel himself up until that 4th century, that mid 4th century, and I don't have a problem with it. I think once you get into, say, the late dating of Daniel, I think you've got some issues there. So, but even if it was, let's just say for the sake of argument, that you have a late date, basically writing of Daniel. Would that change anything for me, really? No, not really. It's kind of, I might see some of the prophecies a little differently. I might see it as either ex eventu or, say, recontextualized prophecy instead. But, that doesn't change things much for me at all. Ryan Cohenkamp, was any of Daniel written by Daniel himself? Don't know. Possibly. But then again, too, Daniel could have used an amanuensis as well. He could have used scribes to do the writing for him. I mean, he was an important official in Babylon. If he was prophesying, he would have had a scribe dictate for him. He would dictate it to a scribe, and the scribe would write it. And this was really a normal thing for people in the ancient world. So, and that's considered to be writing by Daniel himself, is if an amanuensis does it. So, yeah, it's like an executive speaking into a dictaphone. So I believe that some of it had to have been written by Daniel at least. How much of it, I don't know. I'm not really sure. So, okay, so I hope that helped. Thank you very much for the super chat on Daniel. Really appreciate it. Okay, next one we're going to take a few from here. from 18 Ministries here. And then we'll go back and do some non-super chats. History Buff asks for $2. Why is the late date the consensus view? Because the consensus is basically made up of essentially naturalists, essentially, who don't believe. Here's how the logic works for this. The prophecies of Daniel are very uncanny, and people in the scholarly consensus don't believe in prophecy. So those prophecies had to be written ex eventu, after the event. So therefore, it had to be a late date because of Daniel predicting a lot of what happened during, say, the Ptolemaic Seleucid conflict. Okay? And basically the conflict of the Maccabees. All right? So there's that view that you know, you can't believe in prophecy, therefore there's no prophecy. It's kind of circular. But it is in line with their view of naturalism. Okay? So that's why they hold to that view. Okay? Now, that said, however, you're going to have, again, some dating issues here. Like First Enoch, like the Septuagint, that translates, would be a very early copy of Daniel if that were. So I mean, I'm not buying that late date myself. If it happens to be true, doesn't bother me. But I'm not actually buying it yet. I don't see the warrant for it, the evidence for it yet. So I haven't been convinced of the consensus here. But again, I'm also understanding that there's a bias in the consensus too. A bias that happens to doubt, say, biblical revelation and prophecy. Okay? And even historicity. Okay? There's nothing that, say, consensus scholarship in Old Testament studies won't doubt. They didn't find... There's no skepticism they didn't like. Okay? History Buff, do you have any reading recommendations for the dating of Daniel? Yes, I do, actually. Let me see. Let me just get a moment to look this up in my archives here. There was a little book. It was published by I think it was Blackman or Fairman. Here. So just take me a moment to find this. Book of Daniel. This has become a very difficult book to get now. But in many respects, many of the challenges against this consensus position here have been addressed by this and have not been adequately answered. So this book is still relevant to anyone interested. It's called Notes on Some Problems in the Book of Daniel. And it is edited by and written by Donald J. Wiseman, T.C. Mitchell and R. Joyce, W.J. Martin, and Kenneth Kitchen. Okay. And it was published by Tyndale Press in 1965. Okay. So, as I said, it's one of those books. It's a nice little book. Again, a lot of the criticisms of Daniel have been addressed in that book, and it's still relevant because it has not been properly addressed by consensus scholarship. So, Okay, so I hope that helps, history buff. Really appreciate the question, follow up, and I hope that gives you something to work with. Okay, next one here, follower of Ichthus for $10. Thank you for the super chat. He says, I'm assuming before the Dead Sea Scrolls, secular scholars believe the prophecies like Isaiah 53 and Psalm 22 had to have been written after Jesus. What did they say after? Well, I don't think there was really many people that thought that those had been written after, but there was some skepticism as to when those were written. So and that hasn't really changed a whole lot. 19th century critical scholarship always had, say, prophets older than the Torah. So the big issue in critical scholarship in the 19th century was really late dating of the Torah, not so much the late dating of the prophets. So it's not quite fair that said that those things were written after Jesus. They never made that claim, really. But what they would claim is that the Gospels were written to accommodate Isaiah 53 and Psalm 22. So you got a lot of people saying back then that the Gospel writers sort of tweaked the life of Jesus to fit Isaiah 53 and Psalm 22, and people still make those claims today. That hasn't changed much. This is why you get a lot of people saying that the Gospels weren't actually written by the apostles and the people associated with the apostles. So they can say, oh, these are just anonymous works that were tweaked to fit Old Testament prophecy. And that the figure of Jesus didn't really exist like that. So, Messiah Talmud, trust me, bro. Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. It's empty conjecture is what it is. But people make empty conjectures all the time. It's not logical. It's not. It lacks warrant. Doesn't prevent people from doing it, though. Okay. Next one. Okay, next one here is... Take this one next, which is... Oopsie. Kind of got funky here. There. And there we go. All right. This is from AT Ministries for $2. Thank you very much for the super chat. He says, 2 Samuel 20, verses 4 to 10. Did Joab think Amasa was a traitor? Okay, let's go to 2 Samuel. 2 Samuel 20, verses 4 to 10. Okay. And we'll start at verse 3. Then David came to his house at Jerusalem, and the king took 10 women, the concubines whom he had left to keep the house, and placed them under guard and provided them with sustenance. But he did not go to them. So they were shut up until the day of their death, living as widows. Yeah, this is after he enters his... All right. And then the king said to Amasa, call out the men of the Judah for me within 3 days, and be present here yourself. So Amasa went to call out the men of Judah, but he delayed longer than the set time, for he had appointed him. And David said to Abishai, now Sheba, son of Bichri, will do us more harm than Absalom. Take your lord's servants and pursue him, lest he find for himself fortified cities and escape from our sight. So Joab's men went out after him, along with the Kerethites and the Pelethites and all the mighty men, and they went out from Jerusalem to pursue Sheba, the son of Bichri. And when they were at the large stone which is in Gibeon, Amasa came out to meet them. Now Joab was dressed in his military attire, and over it was a belt with his sword in his sheath, fastened at his waist. As he went forward, it fell out. And Joab said to Amasa, "Is it well with you, my brother?" And Joab took Amasa by the beard with his right hand to kiss him. But Amasa was not on guard against the sword which was in Joab's hand, so he struck him in the belly, so that it poured out his inner parts on the ground, and did not strike him again, and he died. Then Joab and Abishai, his brother, pursued Sheba, son of Bichri. Okay. Here's the thing. Towards the later part of, after the rebellion of Absalom, David's hold on power was severely weakened. So what happened was he faced several challenges to his throne repeatedly over the years. Okay, so it became a touchy subject to follow the orders you were given. So if you were sent out to call the men of Judah and you lingered, it was thought that you were basically undermining the authority of the king. And a king in a threatened position like this is going to assume treachery. And I think in this case he was right. Amasa was essentially buying Sheba time to fortify cities and to stage a rebellion. So, yes, the communication that David said to Joab was really, yeah, he's a traitor. Go out and dispatch him. So I think there's no doubt that Joab thought he was a traitor, just because of, say, the compromised position that David was in after the rebellion of Absalom. So I hope that helps. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Next one here. From 2 Samuel 2012. Okay, and which reads, "But Amasa wallowing in his blood in the middle of the highway, and when the men saw that all the people stood, he removed Amasa from the highway into the field and threw a garment over him when he saw that everyone who came by him stood still." Yeah, it's a gruesome sight. Get the body off the road so it doesn't sort of clog the highways and cause the army to stall here. Verse 13, "As soon as he was removed from the highway, all the men passed on after Joab to pursue Sheba, son of Bichri." Yeah, so the sight of the death of Amasa was causing basically the army to rubberneck. Okay? Just the same as an accident on a freeway. Anytime you get a horrifying sight on a freeway, a car crashes into the median and there's body parts strewn all over the place, people slow down to rubberneck. Same thing happens to armies. And in this case, with the gruesome death of Amasa, this was causing the army of Joab to rubberneck. And they had to be in hot pursuit of Sheba. So, yeah, that's why he needed to do this, to keep the army moving. So the next one here from AT Ministries is 2 Samuel 20, verse 26. "What's a priest to the king?" Okay, well, let's see the context and find out here. Okay, and we'll take this from 23 down. "Now Joab was over the whole army of Israel, and Benaiah son of Jehoiada was over the Kerethites and the Pelethites, and Adoram was over the forced labor, and Jehoshaphat the son of Ahilud was the recorder, and Sheva was the scribe, and Zadok and Abiathar were priests, and Ira the Jerite was also a priest to David." Okay, now this idea of priest to David, it's not just a priest; it's a priest to David. And the word here is Kohen. It can mean priest in a religious sense, but in this, it's not talking about a priest in the religious sense. It's talking about a priest in the civil or governmental sense. And it's probably um, better translated as a minister, a governmental minister. Okay. In the parliamentary system of government, are like in Canada, the government is run by a prime minister. Minister is also a religious title. You know, a person who preaches the Bible is a minister. Person who serves the government is a minister. Somebody who ministers to. Okay? The people who are the prime minister's cabinet are called ministers. So you got the Minister of Agriculture, Minister of Defense, Minister of Information Technology and Science. Okay? Yeah, Jack Ray, Minister of Administrative Affairs. Yeah, Administrative Affairs. Exactly, yeah. Yeah, Minister of Administrative Affairs. Yeah, it's a thing, especially in UK Parliament, that's a thing. So, these people at the end of 2 Samuel 20 are not religious ministers. They're government ministers. They are servants of the crown. So, Minister of Magic. If you were at Hogwarts, yeah, definitely. Yes, Minister. Yes, Prime Minister. Oh, yeah. Great show. Especially the original. Strawberry Applebee is just amazing. It's just the best. So, yeah, absolutely. But that's the sort of thing we're talking about, is those ministers. So it's not talking here again about a religious priest. It's talking about a government servant. Okay, a civil servant. So, hope that helps. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciate it. Okay, and we got another one here. Mama, I believe. Okay. Mama puts a member question here. And thank you very much for the question. She goes, what is it about writing your books that you enjoy? 12-year-old wants to be an author illustrator someday. Also, Milo is getting baptized this Sunday. Yaha! Praise the Lord. Her big sister Bubble Machine is baptizing her. Awesome! Oh, that is so awesome. So glad to hear that. Now the question. What is writing your books that what is it about writing your books that you enjoy? I love the whole process of writing. Okay? I love the creative aspect of shaping a story. That's what I really, really love about writing. I love writing quirky dialogue. I love writing humor. I love world building. It's the whole shaping of an entire story and universe around it. So for me, it's all, what I love about it is it's just the process of actually sitting down with my thoughts and the characters in my head and just seeing what they'll do. I love the discovery of writing. I get so excited when I see the characters come alive on the page and they do things I don't expect. Yes, my characters do get out of control sometimes. I do hedge them in by the theme, but they do interesting things because I let them do what they want. So absolutely. I love. There's nothing I would rather do than sit down and write fiction. Okay, or nonfiction. I love writing nonfiction too. It's a different skill set though. The writing of nonfiction is a lot of research and looking things up. So you don't. There's sort of an instant gratification to to seeing that story unfold quickly. And I can see a story unfold really, really quickly with fiction where I can't with nonfiction, but nonfiction is more, is rewarding in its own way too. Okay? So, if your 12-year-old wants to be an author and a writer, I would first of all recommend that they have a day job. Okay? Because it's not something you can make a living off of. Okay? At least not unless you've got a lot of books out there and a large catalog. But at the same time, too, there's nothing more rewarding. It's really a rewarding thing. So I hope that helps. Thank you very much for the question. Really appreciate it. Mama says she has a big smile on her face and giggled. I think she liked your answer. Hope so. Hope so. I would love to encourage her become a better writer. So if she wants to join us on the Discord in our writing group, she's more than welcome to. Oh, my Substack?
Substack.
Yeah, we got a Substack channel too, that Substack blog too, where we also talk about a lot of writing topics as well. So I should put the Substack in the chat here as well. So you find the Substack here and
You seem to be author privilege. Right. Oh, we got to see.
Okay, here's the Substack too. All right, Ryan Cohenkamp. But do they have free will? Well, as much as anyone does, yeah. My characters have a lot of free will. They do a lot of bad things too. So yeah, I think they have some free will. They oftentimes don't do things I want them to do. Clepia says, do you think the author of Revelation enjoyed writing it? Probably not. It sucks to be a prophet. Yeah, prophets don't have a fun job. So Mama says she has a year to go before she's old enough. Old enough to write? Oh, she's writing now. Oh, Substack.
Yeah, actually, Substack.
Oh, you have to I didn't know that Substack had age limitations. Oh, is that what they're talking about?
To get her own social media where she.
Oh, okay. I didn't think you needed that for Substack. I didn't. Don't know. Oh, Discord. Okay, Discord. Well, Discord makes sense. Okay. Okay. I understand. Yeah, Discord has age restrictions. Substack doesn't. So, Substack's just a mailing list with a blog attached. Cool. Cool. Glad you subscribed to the Substack. So, so I hope that helps. Thank you very much for the question. Really appreciate it. Okay. I'm going to go back to 7 something. I'm going to take some of those non-super chats here because there were some good ones in here. Okay. The Count of Marcy asks a non-super super chat here. Gog is the chief prince who rules over 3 regions: Magog, Mashesh, and Tubal. Who is Gog, a person or a fallen angel? That is very much debated. Probably not a fallen angel. What's his name now? Paul Lawrence wrote a little bit on the whole Gog issue in his book Turnips or Egg Whites, Understanding Bible Translation. And one of the things he talked about was the term Gog seems to be a corruption of the name of a person. who basically ruled over parts of Asia Minor. So, but it does seem to be sort of retrojected back to other regional areas as such. So, it's probably not a fallen angel. And it does seem to be a veiled allusion to a person who represents a region. And that's about all we know about this. So, unfortunately, I can't give you much more, but I recommend Paul's little small blurb on this. It's helpful. So, that's the best I can get you on that. All right, next one here. Is from Common Lurker. Is Goshen just Hebrew name for the region, or do we see the toponym used in Egypt? We do see the toponym used once in Egypt. The area is in Egyptians called Geshem or Gesem, and it seems to be the region between Avaris, Paramses, and then the estuary southeast. So it stretches along the estuary where there's a hunting region there. Okay? So that seems to be what the area of Goshen was. It's a regional name. It's not a city name. It's a regional designation. And it does seem to be used by the Egyptians, and it's found in one place in the Miscellanies. So, hope that helps. Thank you very much for the question. Really appreciate it. Okay, next one. Right, let's move on to the next one here. I saw something else here. So when was that question? 8:14. Okay. Ryan Cohncamp asks, is the Adam and Eve Satan the same as Job's Satan? We're not sure. We're not sure. It's possibly yes, possibly no. We don't have enough information about Job's Satan to know for sure. We do know that Adam and Eve's Satan is the same Satan mentioned in the book of Revelation and in the book of Ezekiel. Okay? But as far as it being the same as Job's Satan, maybe, maybe not. We're not quite sure. There's just not enough detail. He's not. We don't have a one-to-one correspondence with that particular Satan. Okay, so again, we're just not sure about that one. So unfortunately, we're kind of guessing, and it could go 50-50 either way on this one. So I hope that helps. Thank you for the question. Really appreciate it. We're at the. We just got ATs left. No, I'm not going to take that one. Okay, let's go on to the next one here. Next super chat here from AT Ministries. 2 Samuel 21 verse 10. What is this custom that she is doing? Let's find out. 2 Samuel 21 verse 10. Okay, and it says here, and Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah, took sackcloth and spread it for herself on the rock from the beginning of harvest until it rained on them from the sky, and she allowed neither birds of the sky to rest on them by day, nor the beasts of the field by night. And when it was told to David what Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah, the concubine of Saul, had done, then David went and took the bones of Saul, the bones of Jonathan his son, and the men of Gilead, and who had stolen them from the open square Beishan, where the Philistines had hanged them. Okay. So we need more context here. Okay. These were the sons of Rizpah. Sons of Saul, who were given to the Gibeonites. Okay. They hanged them on the mountain, and so that 7 of them fell together, and they were put to death on the days of the harvest, at the beginning of the barley harvest. Okay. Okay, so she's doing basically a ritual, a morning ritual here. A morning ritual where she doesn't have access to the bones. Okay? So, this is the context of what happened. Saul violated the covenant with the Gibeonites. David goes to the Gibeonites, says, hey, got to make things right here. The Gibeonites first say, we're not interested. He says, how about we offer some of Saul's sons? Okay, 7 Saul's sons, we'll kill them. And the covenant will be restored. Okay, so at that point, they hang him, kill him, hang him, and then Rizpah, who is concubine of Saul, and of 2 of Saul's sons come from, so she's mother of 2 of these sons that were hanged by the Gibeonites. She starts putting sackcloth. Now, sackcloth is associated with mourning. Okay, sackcloth is associated with mourning. It's essentially goat hair. It's a goat hair fabric that's itchy, really, really itchy. So it's used for mourning. You know, so people will take sackcloth, they'll put it on, and it's really, really itchy. It's kind of like wearing burlap. Okay? Yeah, very much like wearing a burlap sack. It's very uncomfortable, very itchy, and sackcloth is associated with mourning. So she's taking this sackcloth and she's spreading it out over a rock because she can't mourn. She can't mourn because the bones have not been retrieved. The dead have not been retrieved. Okay? So she can't mourn properly because there's nothing there to mourn. So she's doing this, what's called a parabolic act. And a parabolic act is when you do an act that shows a certain parable or has extra meaning to it. And the meaning here is she's putting this damp sackcloth on the rock and not allowing any birds or to rest on it or beasts, and she's guarding this rock, the sackcloth, because she herself cannot wear it because the bones of her relative have not been retrieved. So that's what's going on here. And we see this in verse 11. When it was told to David that Rizpah, daughter of Aiah, concubine of Saul, had done, then David went and took the bones of Saul and the bones of Jonathan his son from the men of Jabesh Gilead, who had stolen them from the open square of Beishan, where the Philistines had hanged them, to the day the Philistines struck them down in Gibeah. And he brought the bones of Saul and the bones of Jonathan his son there, and they gathered the bones of all those who had been hanged. Okay? Now, once they had done that, once they gathered all the bones together, then she can mourn properly. But this is the custom she's doing is showing she cannot mourn. Bones have not been retrieved. They're still hanging. They're still stolen. They're still out of place. They're not where they belong. And then once they're returned, then she can wear the sackcloth and mourn. But until that happens, she has to do this. She's doing this ritual to draw attention to the fact that the bones have not been returned. So I hope that helps. Thank you very much for the question. This was a very good question. Really appreciate it. Next one here is 1 Samuel 21, 16, and 18. The NASB 2020. Giants are a mistranslation. All right, let's go to 16 and 18. Okay. Then Ishi-Benob, who was among the descendants of the giant. This is a Rapha. Now, a Rapha is a giant. Okay. So that is actually translated correctly. A Rapha is a giant. The weight of whose spears was 300 shekels, 300 bronze in weight, and who's girded with a new sword, and he intended to kill David. Verse 18. Now it came about after this that there was a war again with the Philistines. Gob, then Shibbekai, the Hushathite, struck down Saph, who was among the descendants of the Rapha. So yeah, both of these are translated correctly. A Rapha is a giant. I don't think there's anyone who really contests that. There are other places where, say, you might see words, especially sort of descendants of particular, like Anakim, that are mistranslated as giants, that are not giants. Or Nephilim. Some people will mistranslate that as giant, but that's not a proper translation. But in this case, yeah, these are properly translated. So, hope that helps. Thank you for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Yeah.
I have a question on the following question. If the God wouldn't have approved of the
Ryan Cohnkamp guess this is a follow-up question. I think this is to the Ark stuff.
I assume it's
yeah.
The
Oh, hanging of Saul's question. Children.
Just said David.
Yeah. Okay. I'm guessing God wouldn't have approved of that restoration of the covenant. Yeah, the killing of Saul's descendants here. The crime was Saul's, and Saul basically killed a whole bunch of Gibeonites, a lot of them. So, the covenant promises do how to say this? Covenant language, when a covenant is made, there's a promise, there's an oath attached. Okay, there's an oath attached to the covenant. And it's basically, if you violate this covenant, may your God do to you what you've done to us. And both sides swear this covenant. Okay? So, because they have basically saw when the Israelites made this covenant with the Gibeonites, they're basically saying, if we break this covenant and kill your people, may our God kill us. Okay? So there is some blood that has to be atoned for here. You know, you've basically made a promise to your God that he's allowed to kill you to fix the covenant that you broke. So, yeah, these covenants had some really drastic language in it. You know, these are not, oh, you broke the covenant, pay it fine. That's not how these work.
They weren't.
Yeah, you're not getting a parking ticket for this. So, um, so it's hard to know what God would have approved of here, since that language would have been in this covenant, and you're making a promise to God that if there isn't blood shed to restore the covenant, then the covenant is not restored. So, you know, it's one of those things that you cannot. Mama, I'm gonna let you off with a warning. Yeah, no, that's not how that works. That is not how that works. Orion Kronkamp goes, or was that just a bad covenant to make? Well, they weren't supposed to make a covenant. They weren't supposed to make covenants with the people of the land. But if they did make the covenant with the people in the land, they're bound by it. So, yeah, it's one of those things that because they had gone there, they're kind of stuck. God can't bless the actions of Saul because Saul violated the covenant, and he violated the promise to God made by his forebears. So it's a bad covenant to make, but now that they made it, they're stuck with it, and because Saul violated it, he's got to pay the price for it. So that's kind of what's going on there. Okay, let's move on here. Next one here is from let's see. This one I want to go. This one here. Next one from AT Ministries. Samuel 2:19. This another Goliath, right? No. I don't think so. Samuel 21:19. Okay. There was a war with the Philistines again at Gob, and Elihan, son of Jeri-Oregim, the Bethelite, killed Goliath the Gittite, the shaft of whose spear was like a weaver's beam. And there was a war again at Gath, and there was a man, a great statue, who had 6 fingers in the hand, 6 toes on each foot, 24 in number, and he had been born to the giant. Okay. The giant here, referenced in verse 20, that's the original Goliath. Now, you have to understand, by the time of 2 Samuel 21, that David was an old man. He was in his 50s. He was not fit for war. This is not 1 Samuel 21. This is 2 Samuel 21. In 1 Samuel, he's essentially still a kid. He's a teenager. He's a kid with a sling. Okay? And Goliath is an older, experienced warrior. Okay? But there's another war with the Philistines again. And this time, in 2 Samuel 21, what's happening here is this is at the end of sort of David's time as a warrior. So we get another set of giants that David can't defeat. So we see in verse 20, and there was a war again in Gath, and where there was a man, a great statue, had 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, 24 in number, and he had also been born to the giant. And when he defeated Israel, Jonathan, son of Shimei, David's brother, struck him down. These 4 were born to the giant in Gath, and they fell by the hand of David and by the hand of his servants. Okay? So these were the 4 born to the giant. So Goliath is a common name. Very common name. We know of 3 people that were called Goliath. Okay? 3 people. The original giant, the son of the original giant, and there's an ostraca that was found that has the name Goliath. Okay? It's an attested name in Philistine ostraca. So, and this ostraca was found by Gath. So, it was a very common local name in the area. So, yeah, famous names get used, exactly. That is exactly correct. Where did I see that? Yeah. Yeah, famous names get reused. That's why I'm called David. That's why my name's David. Because my parents reused a famous name of a famous king. Funny that.
What? You're not thousand?
I mean, I'm not the original David. I'm shocked. 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 Not that shocked. Yeah. And ancient people did this too. You know, we have several instances of Jacob. We've got several instances of Mary. I mean, there's like something like 7 Marys in the Bible. It's just, it's crazy. But yeah, Goliath was a reused name too. So we have 4 giants here, who were descendant of the original Goliath. And Goliath the Gittite was one of them. That was killed by Elhanan. There was the one with 6 fingers and 6 toes. And there were 4 in total. Saf was one of them. So, yeah. So yeah, this is not the same Goliath. It's a different Goliath, but it's the son of the original Goliath. So I hope that helps. A lot of people look at this Elhanan and say, "Oh, this is so parallel to the David narrative in 1 Samuel. It's got to be the same narrative." No, the context is different for both passages. Again, context of the first one. David is young. They're lining up to go to war. They're too afraid to fight. So David takes a sling out and kills the original Goliath. This one, it's an all-out fight. It's a brawl. And this time, you got his 4 sons who have come out to do battle against the Israelites. And David, at this point, he's an old dude. He's an old man. Context is king. Exactly. Cleopas says, was Moses ever reused in Israelite culture? Yes, it was. We don't see it in the biblical texts, but we do actually have a lot of extra biblical texts that use the term the name Moses, especially in the Second Temple period. It wasn't used so much as far as we can tell in the First Temple period, but Second Temple period, it was definitely a name that was reused. Okay. Dr. Falk, how was fighting the Philistines? They're fighting over land. They're fighting over. They were fighting over agricultural land. This is an agricultural war. He's making fun of me saying I'm not the first David. Okay, well,
So you're David, right?
Okay, how was fighting the Philistines? Survived, apparently. All right, let's take this next one here from Louis Sandoval. Are Buddhists really as pacifistic as many Westerners claim them to be? No. They're not. Particularly to other Buddhists. There's something like 50 different sects of Buddhism, and they're not they're not exactly on talking terms with each other. So the pacifistic thing of Buddhism is sort of overspun. There's been horrible violence between Buddhist sects, really, really nasty intersect violence or sectarian violence between various Buddhist groups. So, yeah, they're not one big happy family. Okay, let's move on to the next one here. Oops. You got to be more pacifistic. I suppose so. All right, next one here. This here. From AT Ministries, 1 Samuel 21, 22 to 22. What is Rapha? We've already talked about this. This means giant. So that's what a Rapha is. A Rapha is a giant. So it's sort of the Hebrew word for giant. So hope that helps. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Okay. What happened to my thing? Kind of went weird. Okay. Next one here. Okay. We know what AT Ministries had for his quiet time this week. I suppose we did. All right. Let's see. All right, next one here. 2 Samuel 22:17, but the temple wasn't built yet. Well, let's talk about that. 2 Samuel 22, verse 17. Samuel 22:17. Not sure the context here. 22:17. He sent from on high. He took me, drew me out of many waters. This has got to be a wrong verse. AT, you might want to check the verse on this one. I don't see any reference to a temple here. So, is he thinking 21 here? 21:17. Nope. No, I think there's something hicky about this verse here. So, 1 Samuel. Let's see, 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel. 22. Nope. That doesn't work either. Oh well. Sorry, AT. I don't have a proper reference here, so I can't really answer the question. So, thank you very much for the super chat, but just we'll get back to you if you can re-put the question in, and we'll do it again. All right, next one here. This one here is from AT. 2 Samuel 22:22. Second Samuel 22, verse 22. This is David's monologue here. Starting verse 21. The Lord has rewarded me according to my righteousness, according to the deeds of my hands, for he has recompensed me. And 22. For I have kept the ways of the Lord and have not acted wickedly against God. But David did sin against God, yes. And that's because all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. So So he did sin against God. Everyone does. But did he keep the covenant is really what the question is. And for the most part, he did. Well, this was not before his sin, okay? This was not before his... I mean, he'd sinned before. But it is before probably his... let's see, is this before Uriah the Hittite? Let's see. Let's look up Uriah here. That's in 2 Samuel 11. So this is after Bathsheba. So he had already sinned in that respect. That he had already sinned against God in the respect that he did sin against God in that he had Uriah the Hittite killed. And that's where things sort of take the U-turn for him. So he's already saying this after his, say, infidelity with Bathsheba. So, but he did keep a lot of the covenant promises. You know, and frankly, this is how essentially kings are sort of judged in the Old Testament. They're not judged on a perfect standard of having kept every jot and tittle of the law. They're judged more on a spectrum of grays. You get everything from, you know, they built high places and worshipped the Baals and burnt incense to Tammuz, to essentially they pursued righteousness and chopped down the burned places and killed the prophets of Baal, etc., etc. So, a lot of, say, how a king is ultimately judged as far as their covenant faithfulness is going to depend upon what the king has done religiously. So, kings do kill people. Lots of people. Every king does. So they're not judged so much on how many people a king has killed, but more along the lines of how they reacted, say, in the ritual sense, in the religious sense. So, in that sense, yeah, David can make these claims. You know, he kept himself from iniquity. Well, when in verse 24 he says, I was also blameless towards him, and I kept myself from my iniquity. That's religious drift. So, oh yeah, what was it? I mean, if you hear like some of the stuff of, yeah, Clypeus says kings kill lots of people. Yeah, they do. What was it? Mary, Queen of Scots, killed 2,000 people, you know, in during her reign. Sorry, yeah, not Mary, Queen of Scots, Queen Mary. Okay, Mary the First. Mary the First killed something like 2,000 people, which kind of unfairly earned her the nickname, moniker of Bloody Mary. But her father, Henry VIII, killed 16,000 people in executions. You know, Henry VIII killed a massive amount of people. We don't think of him generally as a homicidal maniac, even though he probably was. So, so judges don't tend to be judged on the basis of their, say, how many people they kill. They tend to be more judged on their, at least in the Old Testament context, in terms of their ritual faithfulness. Did they worship Baals? You know, did they do injustice as regards to the covenant keeping aspects. Mama says, I don't even think she was a queen for very long. 20 years. Yeah. Queen Mary was on the throne for like 21 years or something like that. Yeah, she was on there a long time.
Because it was a partnership with David.
No, I'm talking
Spain.
Spain, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, she died in her 40s. Yeah, Queen Mary died in her 40s, so... Oh, yeah, Queen Elizabeth I reigned a lot longer. Yeah. Yeah, a lot longer.
But then Queen Elizabeth learned from...
Yeah, she did. Okay, next one here. We'll take is... Okay, next one is from Louis Sandoval for $4.99. Thank you very much for the super chat. In Luke 16:9, what does Jesus mean by making friends through mammon, so one may be received into eternal dwellings? That verse sounds bizarre to me. Okay, let's pull it up and let's take a look. Okay. Luke 16, verse 9. Okay. Now this comes off of the heels of the tale of the parable of the wicked servant. Okay, the wicked steward. The steward who basically is about to be fired. He uses his master's wealth to make friends, and knowing he's going to be fired soon, he deals shrewdly to make friends with his master's creditors so that when he's fired, they'll remember what favors he did for them. Okay? So then that leads us here to verse 8. And his master praised the unrighteous steward because he had acted shrewdly. The sons of this age are more shrewd in relation to their own kind than the sons of light. And I say to you, make friends for yourselves by the means of mammon of unrighteousness, that when it fails, they may receive you into the eternal dwellings. He who is faithful in a very little thing is faithful also in much. And he who is unrighteous in a very little thing is unrighteous also in much. If therefore you have not been faithful in the use of unrighteous mammon, who will entrust you to true riches to you? Okay, so here's what's going on. The unrighteous steward is doing bad things. Okay, he's doing bad things. So, because he's doing bad things, but he's doing it in a way that's shrewd. He's got sort of an edge over, say, the people who are not using this stuff wisely. So Christ says to his followers, okay, you're doing these unwise, you're not handling money wisely, unlike the sons of unrighteousness. So be wise, but be wise also in how you handle money, the mammon of unrighteousness. Okay? So he's essentially saying, be faithful in both. Be faithful in unrighteous mammon. Be faithful in the bigger things. So this is what's going on here, is that he's saying, use your money wisely to make friends, to influence, to show your righteousness, show your trustworthiness. And because if you do this showing your trustworthiness, you won't have to, say, be that sort of shrewd guy, but he's better off. The shrewd, dishonest guy is better off than the righteous guy who doesn't manage things well. Okay? So if you're unfaithful, but honest, and unfaithful means you're not carrying out your duties. Okay? If you're unfaithful, or not diligent is probably a better way of saying it. If you're undiligent, but honest, okay, the shrewd guy is better off than you. You should be both honest and diligent. Show your faithfulness through the small things. Unrighteous mammon is the small thing. So show your righteousness through your handling of unrighteous mammon, money, and then you can be trusted with bigger things of the spirit. So when it comes then to, again, verse 9, where he says, make friends for yourself by means of mammon of righteousness, that when it fails, they may receive you into eternal dwellings. Now, he's not saying here that making friends with money will get you into heaven. He's not saying that. But he's saying that if you use it wisely, this thing, mammon of righteousness wisely, and you're faithful to God, that will make you friends. Friends of a spiritual kind. Friends with God. And that will allow you to be received into eternal dwellings. So what he's doing here is kind of making an amphibole here. Okay? He's using this in two ways. Okay? He's sort of starting off in verse 8 with the unrighteous steward who used shrewd, dishonest tactics to make friends, and then exhorting you to make friends, but he's not saying what kind of friends to make here. But he's telling you the means. Buy money, and you will be received into eternal dwellings. There's only one set of eternal dwellings. That's the heavenly afterlife. Okay? So he's making that sort of shift. He's making that subject shift from the friends of unrighteousness, as it were, to better friends. Be righteous, use the mammon of unrighteousness to do it, and you'll make friends in the heavenly places. That'll get you into the eternal dwellings. So that's what he's driving at here. So I hope that helps. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Okay, next one here. Okay. Is from AT Ministries. And for $5, thank you for the super chat. He says, have you ever been raised to a position you feel God prepared you for, but you feel inadequate for? No. No, not really. I kind of had the opposite thing in my life, where God prepared me and prepared me and prepared me and prepared me, and then didn't place me. Okay? And then he goes, if so, what did you do? Here's... this is going to depend upon what God's is doing with you personally. So I think one of the things is that when you sort of say to God anywhere or anything, sometimes that can be nowhere or nothing. And God can prepare you through years and years and years of nowhere or nothing. So it's going to depend upon what God will do with your life. Sometimes God will take you up on anywhere and anything and put you into high places of responsibility. Sometimes he won't. So it depends on what God has for you personally in store.
But you end up finding out you've reached people's lives,
Mhm.
and what you perceive as
Yeah.
you reach the other desert.
I mean, you could be. I mean, there are people who just get dumped tons and tons of responsibility. That happens. That can happen. It hasn't happened to me personally, but it can happen. Um, and there are people who are, you know, you might feel that God has prepared you for a certain position, and then you suddenly feel inadequate when you've achieved it because you understand the weight of that responsibility. And I can't really guide you on that because I've never actually been through that myself. So, I mean,
Other than most honorable people feel it
a lot of people feel inadequate, yeah, but um,
just because they understand the responsibility.
I
A
mean,
narcissist thinks they're fully qualified in art.
when I worked in the corporate world, um, I kind of always felt like I was the smartest person in the room, and I always felt under challenged. Um, I had always had those problems when I worked in the corporate world where I wasn't challenged enough. I didn't have a lot of responsibility that sort of uh, met my talents. So it was a more of a feeling overqualified than underqualified, as it were. So, Mama says here, separating imposter syndrome out. The times I felt adequate to a big task or responsibility, that's when I crashed and burned. Yeah, that can happen too. That can happen too, where you weren't really as prepared as you might have felt to begin with. So, that's definitely an issue too. Some people do have that. Um, as I said, unfortunately, my bigger problem was overqualification than anything. Um, where, for example, I would have to work for a boss who was actually illiterate, could not read. And it's like, okay, um, how'd you become boss? Uh, and of course, those bosses were some of the worst, and they acted out in weird ways, and ways you would expect an illiterate person to act out. You know, so I've had imposter syndrome a couple times. Um, it's very common for PhDs, newly minted PhDs, to have imposter syndrome. This is very common. Um, I guess the first time I ever had imposter syndrome uh was when I started winning literary awards. That's probably the first time I had imposter syndrome because it's like first book. I mean, I when I did um was nominated for the literary awards for Reliquary of the Dead, I kind of hoped, to get some feedback on the book, think, okay, how to improve the book for the second, because it's really hard to get feedback. Okay, so it's really, really hard to get feedback on a first book. So you get the book nominated for some literary awards, and you think, okay, they're gonna give you like a paragraph review of what they like, didn't like, and I didn't get that. I got awards, so it's like, okay, the first one, it's like, okay, yeah, that was a luck. I got lucky. Like the first award it got from the book fest, I thought I just got lucky. And then the second, the third one came in, and then you get to number 8, and it's like, okay, now I'm not feeling adequate about this. So, um, so that was the first time I actually felt imposter syndrome because uh it was just one of those things that I wasn't expecting, so I wasn't prepared for that. So this can go a variety of ways. You can feel imposter syndrome and be perfectly competent to it, and that's perfectly normal on the Dunning-Kruger curve. This happens where if you're highly competent, you feel less adequate. So that's normal on, say, the Dunning-Kruger curve. While those, say, who are less competent are often overconfident about their abilities. So you get that. But as I said, you also get, say, the opposite of this too, where, God's prepared you for a position and you feel inadequate towards it, but that may or may not affect your performance or not. That depends. So, as I said, most of the time, I'm overqualified for the positions I've held in the past, essentially. So, okay. Let's move on to the next super chat here. He asks, "Did you enjoy my video, Laugh Out Loud?" Yes, I did, where you talked about the romanticy and then you held up my book, Reliquary of the Dead, as an example of a romanticy.
Oh, no, he didn't.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. It was very rude. Very rude. Yes, it was very rude. Very cheeky. Very, very cheeky. And finally, his last super chat here is, "Did everyone write today?" No, I didn't. I've been very busy this week. There's been a lot of stuff going on in my life this week, so I didn't get to write much this week at all. So I didn't write today. Sorry. But I hope you did, or at least got some reading in. Okay. Next one here. Let's go on to the next question here. Next one here is from Louis Sandoval for $4.99. Thank you for the super chat. In the case scenario of Iran being defeated by Israel and the United States, what happens to its prince spiritual being? Daniel reference. Okay. Well, this is still super chats. Yeah, he super chatted that. So he super chatted this. Yeah, we got some sponsor questions coming up too. So, but this is a super chat. Thank you very much for the super chat too. We appreciate the support of the channel. Now, what happens to the prince spiritual being? Not very much. He moves on. You're thinking here of the prince of Persia here. That's referenced, I believe, in Daniel 10, where Michael fights the prince of Persia. But what happens to the spiritual being in the case of, say, a political defeat is it just moves on to the next regime, and nothing happens to it per se, to its essence or anything like that. But what does happen is it sort of loses its power, at least its power base, and has to move on to another regime. So when the next regime forms, it'll be back. Joy. Fantastic. Yeah, Mama's got it here. Looks for the next empty house. Yes, sir. That's what it does, is it looks for the next empty house, and then it goes squatting again. Yep. Oh. They always do the same thing. Always the same stuff. Oh, yeah.
Out of one dude.
Yeah, out of demoniac, where the Gerazim demoniac, where the pig spirits got expelled into the pigs. There was a lot of pigs that went over that brink there. So Yeah, they were having a house party. Those guys were having a house party at the expense of one guy. Mama says squatters, all of them. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Louis Sandoval asks, but if Iran doesn't continue the regime and becomes a democracy, what happens then? Same thing. Yeah, it's a political system won't change that. That's just how these exousia work. You know, the you know, that's how they work. Is these powers, they go to say whatever the government entity is. Doesn't matter if it's a dictatorship, a monarchy, a democracy, a oligarchy. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. They'll just find an empty house among them and crash. That's what they do. It's always what they've done. Mama says, spirit squatters, squatter critters. I kind of like the squatter critter.
Follow up to that. So the prince of
Yeah, we'll take this as one of the sponsored questions here. Okay, so we'll take this follow up because we're kind of short on questions at the moment. For Smiley Bonbon for $2, thank you for sponsoring a question. We'll take Shall We Use follow up as the sponsored question here. So the Prince of Greece has been active throughout the Byzantine era into the modern republic. Oh yeah, oh yeah. Look, they've carved up this planet into territories. So the Exousia, they're the guys that have carved this stuff up, and they're the they've sort of between them and the Cosmic Creators, they've carved up the world and have their own little territories. So, and Greece is one of them. So yeah, they don't die physically, so they just sort of pass on to the next generation. Okay, and Bonbon sponsors another question for $2 Canadian. Thank you for the super chat. Can't sleep sponsoring another question. Sorry you can't sleep. I mean, you're in the Maritimes. It's late over there, so sorry to hear that. Insomnia's not fun. Okay, so he asks, can principalities expand their domain at the expense of other entities, like through imperialism? Yeah, they can. But what usually will happen at that point is they'll probably join forces. Because here's the thing, when you've got like a, let's say something spreads into an empire and a government is dissolved, what'll happen is the principality will then sort of move into the regional politics. They're still holding power, they're just not as prestigious anymore. So they can lose prestige and status within their holdings. But at the same time, too, there's a bit of a meritocracy there amongst the principalities. Which principality can move their government to do, say, be the strongest. So this is why sort of the Prince of Persia has been so successful for so long, is he's been able to keep the governments in Iran, in power for a very, very long time and practically uncontested. From the Persian Empire, right through the Shah and the Ayatollah, there's been a lot of, strong-handed governments in that region. Is that an accident? I don't think so.
Follow-up to that is, what about countries that have been recently?
I will take Mama's first, though. Mama asks, Do you think C.S. Lewis's book, The Screw Tape Letters, did a good job of explaining their extreme competitiveness amongst themselves? Yeah, I think that part is spot on. I think they are very competitive with each other. Now, they're cooperative in the big goal of trying to delay the gospel as long as it can. I do think that they do work with each other, though. But again, it's one of those things where they're united in the common cause of delaying the gospel, but how they get there is a competition. So, um, I think they can be very competitive with each other, and they do compete with each other for who can do the most chaos and damage. So, absolutely, yeah, I think he's got that part right. Louis Sandoval asks, uh, "What about countries that have been recently created after being independent from another nation or empire?" That's just sort of dividing the spoils. You know, let's say an empire breaks up. Now you've got principalities. You know, that's a wealth that's a sort of a power redistribution scheme at that point. So that's what's going on there. So it's power redistribution. So you had one big consolidated empire where you had one principality running the place. Uh, the empire breaks up. Now that power gets redistributed to the lesser guys. So think of it like Christmas, a wealth redistribution scheme. Christmas presents, Christmas tree, wealth redistribution scheme. Empire's breaking up. It's Christmas for the principalities and powers. It's a wealth redistribution scheme or a power redistribution scheme. Okay, so that was fun. Move on to the next one here. Baron St. Vaughn for $5. Thank you for the super chat. Hi, Doc. Outside of shawls, can you explain what's going on in 1 Corinthians 14, 11, 14, 15, and if it applies today? I think that's I think we covered that pretty well last time. But we'll cover it again. 11, 14 to 15. Does not even nature itself teach that if a man has long hair, it is a dishonor to him? It's not a sin, it's a dishonor, by the way. But then again, that's culturally relative. But if a woman has long hair, it is a glory for her hair is given for her a covering. Again, this is about piety and prayer. All of this is. Okay? And the whole head covering things is about piety and prayer. And how you express that is going to be culturally dependent. So, I don't really think that there's much more that can be said about that. In the case of, say, long hair has a very, say, in Corinth, yeah, long hair for men was a disgrace. In first century Judea, long hair for a man wasn't a disgrace. It's culturally dependent, and it was even culturally dependent back then. You see all these, you do see all these portraits of Jesus with long hair. Well, that wasn't inaccurate. I mean, yes, a lot of it is based upon Western conceptions of Christ, but first century Judean men had long hair. It was just normal.
It just for around.
It would not be a man bun, no. In 21st century North America, men with long hair are common. I have long hair. So yeah, it's not something where you can take the particulars and say they apply today or to our culture per se. If they do apply to your culture, then yes. If they don't apply to your culture, then no. Mama says, show off the ponytail.
It's tough.
There. That's about as show off as you're gonna get. All right. That's a 14-year-old request. Okay, that's a request of the 14-year-old. Okay, so yeah, you saw the ponytail there. Yes, I do have a ponytail. You have about 2 inches on Bomb Papa. That's about 6 inches. So what you say, 6 inches, 8 inches? 8 inches? 8 or 10? Mrs. Producer says it's 8 or 10 inches long. Okay. Scott Worthen. Dr. Falk makes me regret cutting my curls back to Marine Corps grooming standards. Hey, if you're in the Marine Corps, yeah, that's the thing. But I was never in the Marine Corps, so... Alright, moving on here. So, Baron St. Vaughn, the principle of 1 Corinthians 11 is to show piety in prayer. That's piety, humility, modesty in prayer. And prayer and worship. And so that's what 1 Corinthians 11 is about. Okay? But he does use culturally relative symbols, features to do this, to communicate this. So you can't take the culturally relative aspects and apply it universally. But the emphasis is on the piety and the humility during prayer and worship. So hope that helps. Thank you for the super chat. Really appreciate it. Okay, next one here. I want to thank Bon for that super sticker for 99 cents. Thank you so much for your support of the channel. Really, really appreciate it. And I do hope you get some sleep too. Yeah, I got to get some sleep tonight too, so I feel you. All right, next one here. Louis Sandoval for $1.99. How can I make video games with no experience? Learn to program. Might be a really good start. Start simple. Start with a simple engine. Okay? If you want to start with a simple engine, use the RenPy engine. And that is essentially uses a subset of Python. Okay? Smiley Bonbon. I think you missed a super chat. I might have. Let's see here. Which one would I've missed? I did do your 2. Where? What? Okay, yeah, probably not there yet. Smiley, I did do both of your sponsoring and other questions. Not mine, someone else's? Okay. Oh, he says, never mind, my bad. Okay, cool. All right, let's move on to Louis Sandoval's question here. Okay. So here's what you'd do. You'd have to learn a programming language. If you want to just learn the fundamentals of game programming, just a real easy starter thing, start with a RenPy game. RenPy is a very, very easy engine to learn. It's a very easy engine to make a game for. It also gives you a lot of flexibility to add to it. Okay? So that's what I would recommend. Learn to program Python. Get yourself a structured editor, because you're going to need a structured editor to an IDE, an integrated developer environment. You can use one like Genie. Genie's great for doing Python programming. So absolutely that would be my recommendation. Learn Python, use the RenPy game engine, and um uh recommendation. I should remember that. But that it's the simplest way to do it. Now, if you want to expand beyond that, there are more complicated engines like Unity, that require, say, other types of programming like C++, etc. But this is a real simple way to start. Is with, as I said, with RenPy, Python, and then you can just build your game upon that, and you can see how that works for you. So, yeah, Kiara's got it spelled correctly here. Let's see, where is it? RenPy. So, okay. RenPy's great too because it'll compile the game for you as well into runnable code. So that's what I would recommend. So I hope that helps. Thank you very much for the super chat. And then just start simple and make it more complex as you go. Okay. Next one here is from Mama for $5. Thank you for the super chat. Can Satan punish spirit critters for not doing what he wants them to do? Do they have to answer to them? I used to see him that way, now not sure. That's a very, very interesting question. Can Satan punish spirit critters for not doing what he wants them to do? Probably. Will he? Probably not. The fact is that spirit critters are like cats. They tend to do their own thing. But at the same time, too, they're going to follow who gives them the best chance for surviving as long as possible. Do they have to answer to him? No. They don't have to answer to him. Will they follow him? Yes. Because again, they represent their best chance of long-term survival. And for spirit critters, this is a survival game, not a victory game. The victory is lost. They've lost the war. They're just extending game time. Okay? So
the personification would be a disciplinarian.
the personification of evil would be a disciplinarian. Head spinner. Yeah, so now some of these spirit critters that fell predate Satan's fall. Okay? So those spirit critters are less likely to bow the knee to Satan. At the same time, too, they'll still follow him because he represents the best chance of them extending this game. So it becomes more of a going the distance than winning. So could he punish them? Yeah. He could use his influence to punish them. He can get other spirit entities to make a spirit that falls out of line do what he wants. Will he? Probably not. Because again, he doesn't. His power is basically on them agreeing to follow him, and if he cracks the whip too much, he'll lose their support. Think of it this way. He's more like, again, going back to the squatter metaphor. Okay? go back to the squatter metaphor, and you've got, with the squatter metaphor, he's basically the guy throwing the room party in somebody else's house. Okay? The house being the world. So, he's throwing a room party in a house he doesn't own for all his buddies. And that's why they show up to the party. Is because he's providing the good times. Okay? His best. So that's really more. That's more his style. His style isn't to punish his lackeys or his colleagues. That's not his style. Could he do it? Probably. Will he do it? No. Again, he doesn't want to turn his own against him. Blonde-haired, blue-eyed, all-right, good guy. Yeah, all-around good guy. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, so, no, he's not likely to do it. Do they have to answer to him? No, but they will. Okay. Next one here is from Smiley for $2 Canadian. Thank you very much for the super chat. Compare orthopraxic Shinto and orthodoxic religion. Okay. Orthopraxis is the idea of right practice. Orthodoxis is right belief. Now, an orthopraxic faith is one where what you do matters more than what you believe. And today, these days, I don't know if I'd even call Shinto an orthopraxic religion. Shinto's very strange anyway. It's more of a cultural religion. It's a religion of kami, of getting blessings from the kami. It's a very loose naturalistic polytheism. Animism. It's basically animism. Okay? So, and how do I say this? You don't find very many fundamentalist Shinto. Okay? There's no fundy Shintos. At least not very many. There are a few. But they're more considered a joke in Japan. It's kind of like in Japan, in Japan, if you really want to be committed to a religion in Japan, you don't actually become Shinto, you become Buddhist. So, now, orthodoxic religion tends to be focused more on what you believe instead of what you do. Now, I think this is sort of in some ways a false dichotomy, because say Christianity is both an orthopraxic and an orthodoxic religion. But Scott Worthen comments here. So Judaism is essentially orthopraxic, and Christianity is orthodoxic. Terminology's connotations escape me. Oh, ortho means right. Okay, ortho means right, like orthography, correct writing. Orthopraxis, correct deeds or practice. Orthodoxic, where doxic means belief, where we get the word doxology from. Doxology is a song of belief. So orthodoxy is right belief. So Judaism is, say, focused on orthopraxis more than, say, orthodoxy. But you do get orthopraxic strains of Christianity too. Eastern Orthodoxy tends to be more, despite the orthodoxy name, tends to be more orthopraxic than it is orthodoxic. So, um, it really is going to depend upon which strain of Christianity or any particular religion you talk about here. Bonbon goes, true Pure Land Shin Buddhism, which is a Japanese sect, is pretty much pure orthodoxic in the sense that belief in uh, Amitabha Buddha gives salvation and rebirth in the Pure Land realm. Yeah, now you've gotten into, though, at that point you've gotten into Buddhism. And that's very typical of say Japanese religion is, again, if you want to go for, say, the serious commitment to a orthodoxic religion, you go for Buddhism. That's really sort of what you do there. Whereas Shintoism is more civil religion. It's civil religion. You go to a Shinto shrine, you pay for a little pendant, hang it on the gate, walk around it a certain way, and you receive a blessing for your test. your college entrance tests, okay? And you do this especially if you haven't studied enough. And that's really what you see more of, like a lot of festivals in Japan are oriented around, say, Shinto shrines, where you go get a blessing first, and then you go enjoy the festival. Smiley Bonnet, I need those blessings for the tests. Yeah, I hear you, man. But yeah, a lot of festivals and local festivals in Japan are, you've got, say, the sort of the civil religious aspect of it, where you go to a shrine, you get the blessing, you do the blessing, burn the incense, whatever, and then you go and you scoop goldfish into a bag, or you eat some sukiyaki, and it's a whole thing that goes on, a whole sort of festival of booths that happen around the shrine. And as this is a much more civil religion, really, than it is, say, a commitment to any particular belief. You ask your typical Japanese, do you believe the kami exists? A lot of them say no. A lot of them don't really believe in the kami. Okay? A kami is the Japanese word for God, small g God. But they'll still do it. They'll still do the practices. Smiley Bonbon, we don't have a civil religion. The West used to have civil religion. Romans had civil religion. Romans had a lot of civil religion. It wasn't uncommon to go to the temples of like Aphrodite or Artemis and do some offering before entering into civil contracts. So it used to be very common in the West before the advent of Christianity. After Christianity came along, civil religion sort of became sort of an orthodoxic thing through the institution of Christianity. But it used to be, we used to have a civil religion, very much so. There's been times when, say, some, say, state churches became more civil religion. You can make the argument that Anglicanism or German Lutheranism became a kind of state religion, which was more civil than it was actually orthodoxic, as it were. So, Scott Worthen asks a follow-up question here. So, scary question to ask from a Marine, but I'll brave it. Anyway, does Bushido come from Shinto or Japanese variants of Buddhism? Bushido was its own cultural movement that came out of the feudal wars of Japan. Shinto predated Budo. It also predated Buddhism's arrival in Japan. So it's sort of more the idea, though, that Shinto and Bushido grew side by side and sort of fed each other, as it were. But Bushido, and for those of you who don't know, Bushido is the way of the warrior. Bushido. Do meaning way. Okay? So, when we talk about that, we just sort of need to keep that in mind as we do this. So, yeah, it's sort of one of those things where it kind of just grew alongside it. But that's because of this sort of the factionalism of the wars within Japan itself. So, hope that helps. Thank you very much for the follow-up. All right, Chow Yi for 15. Thank you for the super chat. What happens when a nation turns Christian? Do they get replaced by saints, for example, St. George in England and in Ethiopia? No, I don't think so. No, the stills, and I think what you're asking is, do they meaning, say, the exousia and the principalities and powers, do they get replaced by saints? No, generally they don't. Saints are not actually involved in, say, the running of governments. See, the fact is that even in Christian states, the leadership is still controlled by principalities and powers. So, you can have, this is why you can still have tyrants in Christian states. Some of the worst, evilest men were kings of England. It was a Christian state. So, Spain was awful. Yeah. So no, that doesn't actually, becoming a Christian nation doesn't actually change that. Unfortunately. Wish it did. All right, next one here is from Chow Yi for, again, 15. Could the independence movements of the 20th century be lesser princes carving out their domains? It's possible. Yeah. Maybe the Prince of Quebec is doing the same right now. Yeah, possibly. Yeah. Yep, that's entirely possible. Again, a lot of this will depend upon who's in charge. I mean, if you look at, say, for example, politics in Quebec, it's very atheistic. Atheism is the dominant faith in Quebec. Even though there's a lot more, say, a lot of nominal Catholics, they're practically atheists. So, in fact, Quebec is one of the least evangelized areas in North America. It's something like 5%. Oh, no, 0.5%. 0.5% of Quebecois are what we would call believing Christians. You get nominal Christians that are practically nominal Catholics that are practical atheists. You'd think it's more heavily Catholic, but it's not. Um, they Catholic churches are attended by atheists in Quebec. Quebec is very weird about this, and it's very weird about religion. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Quebec is very strange about how it treats religion. It does not like religion. Yeah, it does not like religion, and it does not like religious public expressions of religion. So, very, very much, this is a problem with, say, the evangelization of Quebec. Very difficult to evangelize there, and there's no missionaries going to Quebec because it's in Canada. You know, if there's any region in the world that needs missionaries right now, it's Quebec. It's Quebec. You're more likely to find a missionary on a Cree reservation than you are in Montreal. It's that bad. So, yeah, very, very bad. So, I hope it helps. Thank you very much for the super chat. But, Quebec's in a bad way. And princes could be carving it up for their own kicks and giggles. Okay, next one here. I did see something here. I'm going to go back here to James Murray Walsh here, who asks, in your chronology of Nikmadu, of Ugarit and Supiluma II of Hati is connected by the Hittite-Ugarit Treaty, but Nikmadu ended their reign in 1212 and Supiluma started his reign in 1208. And he goes on, is it an error in your chronology? Okay. The dates are not determined by me. The dates are determined by the synchronisms and the computer. Okay, so this could be one of two things. Either the reign length is incorrect, maybe not. I mean, I'll have to check to see if, let me just take a screenshot of that question, and I can double check. See if the dates are really that off. So. Okay. So it's not gonna be a problem with the date. It might be a problem with someone's reign length, or there's a problem with the syncretism. Okay, but it's not going to be an error with the date. The dates, we don't touch the dates. The dates are calculated by the computer based upon the other data. So I would have to take a look at that, and I'd have to see if there's an issue with either a reign length or a synchronism, and then we would make the adjustment accordingly. So, it's not beyond error, but as far as the data we have, it's correct. So, the data we have might be wrong. So that's what I would say about that. It's just, if that's the case, then it was just a refinement, and then rerun it, and then we just fix it. So again, it's the dates are not hard and fast, but the dates can show us when a problem does crop up. But I would have to take a look exactly what is the issue if there. Anyway, okay. Supiluma II is the last king of Hati. Let me just look this up for a moment here. Let me look at the chronology here for the moment. Okay. So Supiluma II. So, yeah, we do have a document for Nikmatu III with Supiluma II. Okay, so we do have that. That is a thing. So here's the thing. In the chronology, because we do have a synchronism for Nikmatu III with Supiluma II, that's documented. So that's a treaty. I'm not really seeing what the error would be. So you would have to be more specific as to what you mean by, is this an error? Because out of the third, 12. Oh, I see what you mean here. Okay. Yeah, here's the thing. It's plus or minus 11 years. Okay? So here's what's going on here. It's you have to take the plus or the minus. Okay, I see what you're getting at. Okay, you have to take the plus or the minus here. So when you see this, I'm going to actually show you this. So let's view. Let me show you this feature of the chronology, and this will probably explain this then. Add window capture. Okay, there we go. Okay, I'm going to show you this. We'll go full screen here. Okay, so the issue at hand here is, at least the issue here by James Murray Walsh is, okay, there we go. Okay, you'll see that Nikmatu III, his reign ends in 1212. But Supiluma II's reign begins in 1208, which is after 1212. But you'll see after Nikmatu II BC, plus or minus 11 years. So, we go up here, the top, and we see that there's there's a bunch of buttons at the top. A low, a mean chronology, and a high chronology. A low chronology is, the mean, by default, it shows you the mean chronology. Okay, but if we hit the low chronology here, the numbers now should reflect, I think. Yeah, with the low numbers here, you see now the numbers change from 1218 to 1201 BC. And for Supiluma II, 1208 BC to 1180. So it's not an error. You're just not seeing the full range of dates because you haven't clicked on the right button. Okay? So the dates are correct. Everything is correct. Just to see the one where it's consistent, you need to hit the low chronology button there, and instead of the default, which is the mean. Okay? So off here. So I hope that helps. Thank you very much for the question, and I hope that brings some clarity to why it's one and not the other there. So thank you very much for the question, though. Okay. Okay, we got one more super chat here from Norabelle Rose. Good to see you here tonight. For $5. Thank you for the super chat. Do you stand by the reign length of 15 years for Seti I? Yeah, I do, actually. Wikipedia seems to think he reigned 9 to 11, specifically rejecting 15 as too long. Here's the problem with Wikipedia on this, is it's not actually capturing what is meant by the 9 or 11, okay? Once you understand how they got to 9 or 11, then you pretty much have to go with a 15. Here's the problem with it, okay? The proposal that he reigned 9 to 11 is assuming that the last 4 to 7 years of Seti the First's reign was taken over by Ramses II. So it's assuming that there's a co-regency between Seti the First and Ramses II, where Ramses II's first 7 years, 5 to 7 years, is basically taking those years from the reign of Seti the First. Co-regencies don't work that way. Okay? They don't work that way at all. The way co-regencies work, when they did happen, is that you didn't take away from your father's reign. It was taken away from your reign, and your independent reign starts. You get credit for those years you were co-regent, but you don't steal the years away from your dad. Okay? So it would still be 15 years for Seti the First and 66 for Ramses II. A co-regency did not steal from your predecessor's years. Ever. There's no examples of this in Egyptian history. And the idea of this, I think, is bonkers. It's bonkers. So Wikipedia is telling you the 9 to 11 years without telling you the context of how they arrived at the 9 to 11 years. So, if this is one of the things that drives me nuts about Wikipedia. It will tell you things and not tell you how it was arrived at. And once you understand how it's arrived at, well, now you have a basis for understanding if it makes sense or not. So absolutely, I still stand by the 15 years. And frankly, so do they. They just think it was taken away from him by Ramses II. And is there any evidence for this? No. There's not a shred of evidence for this. So it's like, it just drives me nuts. So I've got some real issues with that. Also the fact, too, is that if you start reducing his reign to 9 to 11, the chronology goes out of sync as well. It doesn't do good things for, say, the consistency of the chronology. So, yeah, there's a year 11 stela. So there's a year 11 stela. So there's that as well. There's also some dockets too that have an 11th year, or sorry, up to a 14th year. There's a wine docket that is actually a 14th year of Seti the First as well. But here's the thing. Some of those dockets have artificially inflated years, which is what they're thinking here. So some of these guys are thinking that okay, there was a 14th year of. Let's back up a little. Let's talk about the transition between the Theban kings and the Ramessides. This is big deal. Okay, this is what's behind a lot of the sort of the hanky dating that we see at the end of Dynasty 18 and the beginning of Dynasty 19. Okay? The Thebans hated the Ramessides. Okay, they hated them. They thought a Theban prince should be on the throne. There were no Theban princes. It didn't stop them from hating the Ramessides for not being Theban princes. So what happened was you start getting inflated dating of some kings long after they're dead. Okay. Horemheb is generally accepted now to have reigned 14 years. 14, maybe 15 tops. But we have a regnal year, a 28th regnal year for Horemheb. We've got a 52nd regnal year for Horemheb. Now, guys like Kenneth Kitchen thought that the 28th year was valid, but the 52 year wasn't. Everyone agrees that the 52nd year of Horemheb was basically the Thebans trying to stick it to the Ramessides by not acknowledging their reign. Okay? So the Thebans started playing hinky, fast and loose with some of these regnal years to deny the Ramessides' credibility. Okay? So we get today now with the idea that there's a 9 to 11 year span of say Seti the First, that 14th year docket. They're going to some Egyptologists, not by no means all, some Egyptologists say that wine docket was inflated in the same way that the 52nd year of Horemheb was inflated. Any evidence of this? No. But at the same time, too, that whole idea that those last 5 to 7 years were basically taken from Seti and just added to Ramses II, hogwash. It's total hogwash. So, this is one of the reasons why I just don't trust Wikipedia for this stuff. They don't understand what the process was for this to get there. So, and I wish they would give you the larger context of this, because it might change what people think. But Wikipedia is not good about context. It's not good with chronology. It's terrible with chronology. Some of the worst, a lot of the chronologies that you find on Wikipedia and the information supporting those are 30 years old. Woefully out of date. So, unfortunately, yeah. I still stand by a 15th year for Seti the First. I think the evidence supports that strongest. And even those who hold to that 9 to 11, they think that too. They think that there was a 14th, 15th year of Seti the First. They just think Ramses II stole it. And I think that's nonsense. So there you go. That's my opinion on that. Hope that helped. Thank you for the super chat. Really appreciate it. And the final super chat here is from Louis Sandoval for $4.99. Thank you very much for the super chat. And he asks, how theories about early matrilineal societies instead of patriarchal societies relate, if at all, to the sons of God and daughters of men in Genesis 6? I don't. I don't think they relate. Yeah. The sons of God and the daughters of Adam in Genesis 6, I think, are priestly lines. The whole Genesis 1 to 11 is couched in ritual language. It's ritual prolegomena. This is where sort of the idea of priestly lines begins here. And that lays the foundation for, say, the Levitical priestly line. So that's sort of the understanding there of Genesis 6. This is where we get priests from. The priestly, a line of successive priests is through this line of the sons of God. Okay? So that's sort of prolegomena for there being priests from a single line of Aaronic priests. Okay? So Now, theories of matrilineal societies instead of patriarchal societies. Um, the problem here is that patriarchal societies tend to survive, matriarchal societies don't. Matriarchal societies are incredibly fragile and brutal. Let me put this too. They're brutal. Matriarchal societies often have to engage in the trade of children in order to maintain their numbers. Okay. It's a little ironic. Matriarchal societies, the ones that sort of survive, not the ones that just fall apart, not the ones that just sort of act like patriarchal societies, but because you do get that too, where it's not a true matriarchy, it's just a patriarchy with a gender swap. You do find that, because especially once sort of external pressures on the society happen through war and intertribal conflict, they often tend to become patriarchies, but with women in charge. Not true matriarchies. Now, true matriarchies have to maintain a certain gender balance. And usually that gender balance is a small core of women with lots of men. Okay? Women are in charge, and they use breeding pressure to control the men. Okay? So, what happens to the little girls? They get traded to other tribes for little boys. That's generally how matriarchies control, say, their populations. Is they trade off the little girls to other tribes for little boys, knowing that those little girls will become probably slaves of the not nice kind, and they do it to maintain control within the matriarchy. Okay? So once you have that control within the matriarchy, that you can control the men through limited breeding opportunities, you can get them to do all sorts of stuff. So that's really what sort of happens in matriarchal societies, is they get involved in a child slave trade. Because they have to in order to control their numbers. So Louis Sandoval asks, is that early matrilineal society consistent with Genesis account, specifically the whole Adam and Eve? There we have no records of a early matrilineal society in Genesis. We just don't have that. All of the accounts that we have in Genesis are patrilineal, not matrilineal. So it's not something that you find in Genesis. In fact, almost all the genealogies you find are in the Old Testament are patrilineal, not matrilineal. So it's not a thing you find in the Bible. So I hope that helped. Okay, we are at the end of the super chats. Did we want to take any non-super chats, or do we want to just call it a night?
Reagan
10:43. Okay.
said You said they were rebellions. What was that mentioned?
Okay, we'll take that. $10.43. Okay, Gabe Reagan asks, you said that there were rebellions previous to Satan. Where's that mentioned in scriptures? Mentioned in the book of Jude. Now, Jude is coded. Okay, it's ancient Near Eastern coded. So unless you know the coding, you can easily get confused by this. But let's talk about this. Now, Jude is not, when it talks about here's the thing. Verse 6, Jude 6. And angels who did not keep their own domain, but abandoned their proper abode, he has kept in eternal bonds until the darkness for the judgment of the great day. Now, a lot of people will read this and think this is talking about basically Genesis 6, where they sort of read into this that angels are having conjugal relations with humans. That's not what this is talking about. Now, angels here is used as a catch bucket. Okay, basically a catch bucket for those spirits that were once aligned with God. So that's what this is. It's a catch bucket. But the key to understanding this verse is did not keep their own domain, arche, their own principality, their own domain. Their domain here is a principality. Okay? But abandoned their proper abode. Okay? And this is orcheterion, a habitation. Okay? Now we've talked about arches before. The spirit arche. An arche is a principality. This is the highest of spirit beings. Okay, an arche, when it's talking about a spirit creator, is the highest of spirit beings in, say, amongst the fauna of the spirit critters. Okay, these are the guys who hold basically all the power, and they hold that power within a domain, which is also called an arche. Okay, so these are the high places, the heavenly high places. Now this is these are not angels as such as in cherubim or seraphim or those kind of critters. These are primordial deities. And the ancient Near Eastern talks about literature talks about this a lot. Okay, it's only alluded here to indirectly, but it's unmistakable what it's talking about. Now, these would have been beings that God put into these domains to maintain the order of the universe. After God vanquishes the chaos monsters, he puts these primordial gods in their place to fill the vacuum. And they're supposed to stay in that place to maintain the order of the cosmos. But they didn't stay there. They didn't keep to their domain. But they abandoned their job site. So when we say here, but abandoned their proper abode, their proper habitation, these are the spirits that are supposed to prop up creation, and they derelict their duty. So that's really where we see this. We see this most explicitly in the book of Jude. Unfortunately, Jude is not the easiest book to exegete without a good, solid understanding of Greek. So people often confuse what it's talking about. Like, for example, they'll often conflate um, um, verses 5, 6, and 7 together to be the same thing when they're actually in parallel and talking about separate things, which it then comes back and talks about later. So so that's where we find it in Scripture, is in Jude, verse 6. So I hope that helps. Thank you very much for the super chat, for the question. Really appreciate it. Okay, we had a PA888 for $20. Thank you for your generous super chat here. Sponsor, a quick question. Your choice, your choice. Okay, well, thank you so very much for your support of the channel. We really appreciate it. Yeah, let's do the Great Whore. Because it's always fun. When is that? 10:42. All right, 10:42. All right. Louis Sandoval asks, why did the beast turn against the great whore in Revelation 17:16? All right, let's talk about that. Revelation. Seventeen. 16. All right. And then the 10 horns which you saw and the beast, these will hate the harlot and will make her desolate and naked and will eat her flesh and burn her up with fire. Okay. Now, who is the mystery Babylon? Okay. Whenever you see that term mysterion, okay, the harlot, the great harlot, okay, and we see her called in this, where is this? Where's it begin? Yeah, and upon verse 5, and upon her forehead the name was written, a mystery. If you see that word mysterion, that's coding. A mysterion is used one other place in the Bible. And this is what's super interesting about this. Okay? It's used for the body of Christ, the church. You know, Paul talks about the body of Christ as a mysterion. Now, a mysterion isn't a mystery as in we don't know what it is. A mysterion is a wonder. It's a wonder. It's a paradox. Okay? It's something that shouldn't be but is. So, like for example, the body of Christ is a mysterion. It's many members that are united together to form the church, the body of Christ. And each one of us is a member of the body. Well, this is also, in that same way, a mysterion. Babylon the Great, the mother of and the abominations of the earth. The mysterion is a conglomerate of human religion. False, unfaithful human religion. Okay? It's a religion that practices all the abominations, all the unfaithfulness, all the idolatry. Why is she called Babylon? Because what happened at the Babylonian exile was the Israelites were practicing idolatry in Israel. Okay, the Israelites were practicing some worshiping of the sun god. They worshipped Baal. They worshipped Tammuz. And God said, Hey, you want idolatry? I'll give you idolatry. I'll give you lots and lots of idolatry. So I'm going to exile you to Babylon for 70 years until you get sick of living under idolatry. Okay? So here we have Babylon. This is idolatry. This is that conglomeration of human idolatrous religion. It's unfaithful. It's the emblematic paragon of unfaithfulness and abomination. And abominations include things such as idolatry, treachery, sin of all kinds. The glorification of sin and false religion. That's what it is. And it's all human oriented. This is human religion, human abominations, human unfaithfulness. Okay? So then we get down here to verse 16, where and the beast will hate the harlot and make her desolate and naked, and will eat her flesh and burn her up with fire. The devil doesn't like human religion. Even the unfaithful stuff. He has complete and utter disdain for it. He doesn't like people worshiping God, but he doesn't care for human religion either. Because he doesn't like humans. He doesn't like humans. He doesn't respect those he deceives. So this Mysterion, this aggregate of all things impure and unholy, even Satan detests. He detests it because he disdains it. He thinks it's stupid. And he doesn't respect what's stupid. So that's why he's going to turn on it. He's not going to support it forever. He doesn't like... He'll only support it... Satan will only support this as long as it serves his purposes. And once it ceases to serve his purposes, he will turn on it. Okay. What do we see here? Just saw a follow-up question here. Follow-up question here. So then Lewis asks the follow-up question, doesn't the devil create false religions to distract from God? Yes, he does. But he doesn't like them. He has no respect for them. You know. This is, again, one of the things we have to understand about our opponent. Is, you know, he's a squatter who's sitting on Earth in a house he doesn't own, making fun of those whose house it is. And he thinks human belief is dumb. Okay? He thinks it's dumb. He thinks people who follow the lies... I mean, it's like a con man who has complete disdain for those he swindles. You know, basically, a con man... You get these con men who think they're smart. Who think they're really, really smart. And they mock those they con because he thinks he's smarter than them. Satan's the same way. He mocks those, he disdains those, he fools, he deceives. He doesn't like them. He thinks he's better. He's an ultimate narcissist. Remember, the big sin of Satan is pride. One aspect of that pride is he thinks he's better than humans. So, spirit squatter critters, yeah. I love that term too. Okay, so, Louis Sandoval. So technically, the devil, while opposing God, hates certain sins he considers even to be disgusting. He thinks they're dumb. He thinks they're stupid. It's not that he thinks they're so disgusting. He just thinks they're stupid, and people who fall for it are stupid. So he has no respect for those he deceives. Yeah. This is the thing what I think is so funny about these so-called Satanists who think they're so intelligent. I mean, you talk about, like pure Satanism, and it does exist. It doesn't. I mean, they don't believe in the Christian conception of Satan. What they believe is Luciferians. They tend to believe that they are part of an elite, that they're better than others because they've defied the religion of the world of say Christianity. So they tend to have an elitist angle to their. So a lot of Luciferians basically think that if they can do something, to harm somebody else, that makes them better and smarter. Well, the fact is, though, that's actually not a bad reflection of Satan himself. Satan thinks if he can deceive them, that he's smarter and better than them. So Satan disdains his own followers, at least among those that are human. Because frankly, once a human dies, they're of no use to him anymore. A dead human is no use to Satan. Mm-hmm. Satan doesn't reign in hell. A dead human is just another way to poke his finger at God's eye. Basically, that's what it is. It's another way to try to hurt God, is to kill humans. But once a human's dead, that human is nothing except a fodder for mockery. This is how say Satan and his gangs get their jollies, is they sit around in their squatted residence talking about the guys they've deceived. And saying what kind of idiots they are. So,
like bullies.
Yeah.
They beat up a 98-pound weakling. There was 5 of them and one of the kid, but they're breaking him.
Yeah, it's like high school bullies bragging about how they beat up the high school weakling. It makes them feel superior. Well, you know what? They do the same thing here, with humans. These spirit critters, they have no love for the Mysterion they created. They just think it's dumb. And because they think it's dumb, they disdain it. And ultimately, they'll predate upon it. So anyway, Lewis, I hope that answered your question on Revelation 17, verse 16. Why Satan ultimately turns on the mystery Babylon. That's the reason. He thinks she's dumb. Because he thinks she's dumb, she's just going to be another victim. Luis Sandoval asks, but how does know the revelation about the beast apply as right now or in the future? I tend to be a futurist when it comes to the Book of Revelation. Um, so I think it is talking about the future sometime. So, um, again, a lot of this, if you understand the Book of Revelation, the book is about trying to make clear the prophecies of the Old Testament. And in doing so, by doing this, it infers that those have not come to pass yet. So there's no sense in sort of clarifying that what's already happened, because you can kind of see that for yourself. You don't need that clarified. So it really does infer a futuristic position. So that's why I don't really take a preterist position on any of this. I think it's a lot stronger when you contextualize it to the Old Testament, because that's what the book was designed to do. So, hope that helped. Thank you for the follow-up question. And unless there's anything else pressing, did we have any more super chat? Oh, we did have some. Okay. We got one more from Louis Sandoval here, and this will probably be our last question of the night then. For $4.99. Thank you very much for the super chat. What could Adam technically do to the serpent instead of Eve? Since Adam is the embodied being, and serpent, I suppose, is a disembodied cherub. I don't understand this question. You understand this question? I mean, technically, the serpent has more power than the humans. But,
Well,
could he use it? No.
I don't know if he's asking. I mean, obviously, an embodied being has more actual agency
Yeah, it has agency in a physical world, but yeah, I don't understand the question really. I mean,
I don't know the instead of Eve.
Yeah. He adds here, like if Adam encountered the serpent before Eve became deceived by the serpent.
The problem was Adam was there when she ate the apple.
Yeah, he was there. He was
not deceived. She was.
Yeah, he was not deceived. She was.
So Adam ate the apple, knowing full well what he was doing.
Yeah.
Knowing full well he was disobeying God.
Yeah.
Which is another reason Adam
was cursed. Yeah, I don't think it's really it's a very much a hypothetical question anyway, because the serpent did manage to deceive Eve. The best Adam could have done here was basically say to Eve, don't eat the fruit. That's basically the best he could have done. He had no power to slap the serpent down. He didn't have that agency. That's not within his sphere of power.
I don't know if he's saying.
Basically, that's all he could have done was basically say to Eve,
when this was the snake and it was in an embodied to it.
Well, it would be a simulacra body anyway, so it's not even a real body. So yeah, there's nothing really Adam could have done physically to the serpent. The only power he would have had there was to basically say to Eve, nah, don't touch that thing. Don't touch that. And then if Eve decided to still do it anyway, then she's fallen and he's not. Which ends up being a really odd situation of imbalance at that point. So, kind of a strange question, but we took it anyway. All right, so I think we're going to call it a night at this point, because I do need to sign off by midnight here, and we're just about 10 minutes away, so it's a kind of a good idea to wrap this whole thing up. Was there anything other business we need to do? Or are we good? We're good. Okay. All right. I want to thank everyone who joined us tonight. It was another great live stream. Thank you so very much for those who support us through super chats and through donations to PayPal. If you haven't donated to us by PayPal before and want to, you can find the link in the description. We also want to thank those who support us through Patreon and through YouTube memberships. You guys keep the lights on and the equipment running. We so appreciate that too. Thank you very much. And finally, we want to thank those who support us through watching our videos, hitting that like and subscribe button, and sharing our URLs with other social media platforms. You guys get the message out. So anyway, thank you very much for watching tonight. We really appreciate it. And we'll see you next time on Ancient Egypt and the Bible. Good night, everyone.